And Commissioner Harvey will do our invocation. Commissioner Pickens will do our pledge of allegiance.
Let us bow our heads. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for just a wonderful day, a day of replenishing our earth with the liquid sunshine that you're giving us today. And Lord, we just pray that today as we meet, Lord, that everything will be done in order and approved by you. We'll be civil, we'll make our points, and Father, we'll respect each other. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Tompkins, you're going to have the microphone. We're going to start with pet waste ordinance.
Let's go to pest waste ordinance
Okay,
until to a later date.
Okay.
Y'all get back to work.
Yep.
Not so fast.
I really wished he could.
Not so fast.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll put that on hold. We go to the county attorney's comments.
Really no general comments. You should have received something I just sent out recently regarding the matter we discussed at the end of the meeting this morning. You should have something in your email.
Oh, okay.
Great letter, by the way, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's start off here with the commissioner comments. Fort Gates Ferry, Drayton Island. I don't know if anybody's concerned about that, but we want to welcome you here today, by the way. And I appreciate the tour yesterday, and it was very graceful. By the way, I spoke to some of you about the fire truck that's sitting there, and I got a hold of the chief. I found out that there had been, that he had been out there to speak with everyone, and that you've got to be certified in order to operate the truck, and that's basically it. You're going to have a group of you get together and get with the chief and take the classes and be certified, and then you'll have a volunteer fire department out there. Anyway, so let's move on.
Chairman Gunter, could I make a comment?
Yes, sir, you can.
I also want to thank the members from Drayton Island for being here and for inviting me. A couple of Saturdays ago, I came out, and there was a very large group. I'd say, Judith, probably 50 people that I spoke to and did my best to answer questions about, the ferry landing road, Fort Gates ferry landings, the barge, and Drayton Island barge, and the ferry landings. So anyway, they were very courteous, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And also to Commissioner Goddard's comments. Some of you were there 2 or 3 years ago when the fire department came out and met, and that is the issue there. We can get with the president of the Georgetown Fruitland Volunteer Fire Department, Chief Captain Grimes, but you have to have at least certified training 1 to be able to operate that truck. We can keep a truck out there, but we can't just allow y'all to use that. So I'll be glad to talk to y'all after that. The annual meeting is coming up, I think, next Tuesday evening, where that could be discussed if some of y'all want to be represented there. So, thank you.
Okay. All right. My question, and I guess that's where I was going with, what information do we have now on the ferry?
Well, I can give you an update on Drayton Island Road. I know that was a big topic of discussion last month at the workshop or transportation meeting, whichever one it was. And at that time, the information that I had received was that we didn't have enough records of maintenance of that road out there in order to claim it as a county road. Since that time, I have received additional information from staff. They were able to dig up some records going back to 1992, which establish over the years there was a considerable amount of maintenance done. There was a gap here or there, but there was maintenance. And based upon that information and discussions that I have had with Mr. Butch Paul, who's a landowner out there, he's an attorney out in DeLand. I've actually known him for years, so real good guy. We had some very good conversations, but in any event, between the information that staff has now been able to provide as well as additional information that Butch Paul has been able to provide, I do believe that at this point the county can and should declare that Drayton Island Road is in fact a county road, and I believe that staff should go out there, survey the existing location of the road, and prepare a maintenance map to bring before you all to approve that into the maintenance system. And on that topic of the maintenance maps, I believe that's the way we should be doing it for all of them. When we're doing a maintenance map, they should come before the board for approval, and then at that point obtain the chair's signature and be recorded.
Okay, now, the maintenance map would be given clear definition that we have legal right-of-way to be on.
Exactly.
That
That is prima facie evidence of county's ownership, vested ownership in that road, to the extent that it has been maintained for the required period of time. And again, it depends on if the county built the road or another entity built the road, as the number of years fluctuates. In any event, whether it be 4 or 7 years, either 4 continuous or 7 regular, and that's another difference, 7 years regularly maintained or 4 years uninterrupted, depending on who built it. We have to do a little further research in that regard, but I think we'll meet either one of those requirements to establish that that is in fact a county road.
Commissioner Turner?
Okay, the road issue isn't really why I asked for this to be workshopped. It was more the grant and the ferries and the landings and the what have you, but this is really great information to know. I saw a map that has been prepared that shows the actual platted road and then where the roads themselves are, and they don't really match up.
Right.
From the platted road to the existing landing area is obviously not the platted part that has shown up on the plat. So would I thought I was in trouble again.
Yeah, watch it when Tabby walks up.
So basically, there's a short area of road in there where the actual road is that's not platted, that goes across that lot. Would the county have a prescriptive easement on that? So could we maintain that, or would the citizens possibly have a prescriptive easement, but not the county, or both of us?
No, it would be wherever the existing road is that has been maintained by the county is what would be the county road. So really where it shows up on a plat, I know there was a number of different plats out there and there was some conflicts, but really that is not relevant to the discussion at this point. It's where the road is, where the road has been, and where the road has been maintained is what would be vested in the county.
Okay, and then, and of course, that'll show on the maps.
Exactly. Then that's why we need to have them go out there and survey the exact location of the existing road and prepare that map for recording and for placement in the maintenance.
Now, let me ask you, once that map is done, do the islanders get to, before that's approved, will they have the opportunity to look at it?
Well, and that's why I say I prefer that all of those they should all come before the board. So when it is on an agenda, they can certainly come and comment on it before you all give it a yay or nay.
Okay, all right, great. Mr. Turner, I think he may have.
Yeah, wasn't quite done, but that's fine. So even if we've maintained the area from the little been maintained
road or not, it doesn't really matter as long, because that would give the county a prescriptive easement.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, do we need to go in and do any kind of legal documents or anything once the map? I think the surveying that was done, and Press, help me out here, Mr. Tompkins, Press, help me out here if you would. When it was surveyed before for the grants, for the purpose of the grants, they surveyed what was actually supposed to be there, not particularly what is there. Is that correct? And because the landing is supposed to be 163 feet to the north or up the shoreline. So, so I guess my question would be to make sure that when we'd have to go out and survey it again and actually survey where the existing roads are, if it's deemed to have a prescriptive easement. Is that correct?
That's right, and
Prepare a map off the new survey that shows where the county road is going to be.
well, where the county road is. The
Done, do the islanders get to, before that's approved, will they have the opportunity to look at it?
Well, and that's why I say, I prefer that all of those they should all come before the board, so when it is on an agenda, they can certainly come and comment on it before you all give it a yay or nay.
Okay, all right, Mr. Turner, I think he may have.
Yeah, wasn't quite done, but that's fine. So even if we've maintained the area from the landing all the way through the island where it's been maintained, whether it matches up with the road or not, it doesn't really matter as long, because that would give the county a prescriptive easement.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, do we need to go in and do any kind of legal documents or anything once the map? Because I think the surveying that was done, and Press, help me out here, Mr. Tompkins, Press, help me out here if you would. When it was surveyed before for the grants, for the purpose of the grants, they surveyed what was actually supposed to be there, not particularly what is there. Is that correct? And because the landing is supposed to be 163 feet to the north or up the shoreline. So, so I guess my question would be to make sure that when we'd have to go out and survey it again and actually survey where the existing roads are, if it's deemed to have a prescriptive easement. Is that correct?
That's right, and
Prepare a map off the new survey that shows where the county road is going to be.
well, where the county road is. The way the statute is written is once the county performs maintenance for the required number of years, the road automatically vests in the county to the extent it has been actually maintained. So the map, the real purpose of the map is it provides prima facie evidence of the road and the county's ownership. But a recording of the map isn't required for the county to be the owner of the road. That actually occurred just by the fact that it was maintained for the required number of years.
Okay, good. If I understand that and I don't know who to address this to, whether it be to Public Works or you, but I understand by reading this packet that the back end of the island, there's a paved road that I guess somebody said in here that somebody donated the asphalt and the county did it or something, I don't know, back in the 90s or 80s or whatever. But that somebody after that built a gate across the end of the road. And so if that road hasn't been, even though it may have been built back in the day before it was against the law or illegally, if the county built a private road, whatever, does that mean that it would just be from the gate out? Because obviously by reading the packet, the gate's been closed for years, so the county hadn't maintained it if they can't get through the gate.
Well, yes, that's an accurate statement. However, in my discussions with Mr. Paul, who was actually the gentleman that put the gate across the road, I talked to him about that. I said, what's up with the end? What's going on there? I said, from my understanding, that the county actually, paved that with donated asphalt. And he said, yeah, the county did. Although because he couldn't see any records of any maintenance of that either before or after. That's why he put the gate up. But he did say he has no objection to taking that down and having the county just, claim the road all the way from start to finish.
So even though that the original plat didn't show a road there, I mean, I'm just going off the information I read in this packet. Even though the original plat didn't show a road in that area, us having paved it in the past would give us the right to claim ownership to that also?
Yeah, and if I think we would have to establish additional maintenance before or after that. But as the landowner, around the road, he would have no objection to just, agreeing to it. He wouldn't fight it. So, and if necessary, if we asked him, he'd provide, a deed, to clean it up if we needed it to. So.
Okay, I think that's it for now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for Mr. Manning. In the last workshop, you and I were sitting close to each other, and this document, this resolution dated July 13th, 1960, where it takes in the roads. And I asked you, I said, it's kind of the county's fault, in my opinion, for not doing what the resolution said we should do.
Mm-hmm.
We did on some roads, and we didn't on other roads. So help me understand, if you don't mind, why is this maintenance map and all this has now come into trump this statement here? Why do we now have to show we've done something when back then we should have did what that said to do?
Well, because when that resolution was adopted by the board, we should have, and we may have had maintenance records, but they don't exist now, so we can't prove ownership. So that document in and of itself, we can't rely on to establish ownership of any of those roads, just relying on that document by itself.
Okay.
That's why we have to fall back to either a dedication that was accepted by the county, or deeds that were accepted by the county, or maintenance for the prescribed period of time, which is what we're looking at now. So that document really doesn't come into play.
So if we had documents dated 1961 per se, and it showed maps on these roads, we wouldn't be discussing this today.
Right, no, we wouldn't.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have one more if I could. These are Class 2 roads, so they're done as necessary. They're not Class 1 where we go every 6 weeks and do them. What are they classified as now?
Right now, Drayton Island Road is classed as a Class 1 road.
So what we should be doing then is every 6 weeks or so, we should be in there grading on it as a Class 1?
Within our cycle, but I do not have the capability right now of taking our equipment over there. We have to rent a small grader over there. I do not have that in my budget to do that.
Microphone.
Okay. Well, it sounds to me like you need to find some money in the budget to get a small grader and go over and grade the road.
Well, I mean, it would be up to the board to decide what we would bring this road in, as a Class 1 or a Class 2. I mean, we have found many discrepancies in our maintenance book that we have between Class 1 and Class 2 and Class 3 roads.
Well, that's why I was asking. If it was a Class 2 road, then it would be, basically looks to me like what has been done in the past and treated like in the past. By looking at the maintenance agreements over the last 25 years or so, it showed that it, as necessary, things were in there being done. It wasn't every grading cycle that we had a grader over there doing the work.
That is correct. I would, I think in all fairness of what we treat other roads in the county, this would be a Class 2 type road, and we would grade it as needed on that basis.
Okay, I'm done for now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Mr. Tompkins, since you mentioned that, and looking at this, we haven't done anything out there since 2015. How did we get the grader over there then?
I honestly don't know. It was before my time. I don't know how if we did the grader over there or if we took a small tractor over there. I don't know.
Somebody knows.
We took over the large grader.
Karen, can you come up to the microphone? We do get this on recording, so.
We took the large grader over. It was 31,000 pounds. Right now, our decking isn't good enough to take it over.
I can't hear you.
The decking that's on the island side isn't good enough to take that over right now,
Okay.
okay? You need
So
a
we don't
small
need to
one.
really buy a new piece of equipment. Once the landings are done, we can still take our current grader over there.
As long as the decking on the island side is
Right.
repaired.
We got that.
But we've only repaired those 20,000 pounds, not 31.
Mike, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
DOT is moving forward with all their permitting and design and everything to move forward with their project to replace both landings.
To what's the poundage then at that point?
All FDOT traffic that can handle concrete trucks to you name it.
77,000 pounds, I believe.
77,000 pounds.
What's the, Mr. Chairman, you mind if I continue? What would be the weight limit on the barge then?
You'd have to have a different barge. The barge that we currently have would not going to take 77,000 pounds.
But you had the capacity to carry a grader in the past on the existing barge, correct? Because we've done it in the past, correct?
One time. We took it one time. I don't know that I would say that was the best idea, but you could do an incline test on the barge that you have now, and you could determine what legally you could do.
So Karen, what you're saying, and what I'm hearing is basically DOT is going to build these landings that are going to be huge and hold a lot of weight, but we can't get it over there because we don't have a barge big enough to get it over there. Am I right in saying that?
Right now, that is correct.
Mr. Chairman, this is where I was hoping that we would start out this conversation. And I'm glad that we got the roads worked out, and I never had a problem with the roads being county and that we should maintain them here and there. That's not been my deal. My whole deal here has been to try to find out exactly what's going on with the barges, with the landings, with the grants, with, do we take if we're gonna build a new barge, but that means we got to build all these landings and everything too. How much of that grant is for the Drayton Island side, and how much of it is for the Fort Gates side? And if it's for Fort Gates and we've got to tie this all together, then we need to figure out how to bust them up, because I look at them totally different. And I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag and get the fight started. I've never once said that I was for getting rid of the Drayton Island Ferry. Not one time in any of these conversations we've had. But there's several things here that need to be straightened out. Number one, can we get by with the barge we have now or not? If we can, then we don't need to spend all the money on the new 40 by 70 barge that we need 2 new landings because the barge is bigger, and a new push boat because the existing push boat won't do it. So, and that's one decision. The other decision is Fort Gates. Do we have to continue on with that? Obviously, Fort Gates Ferry doesn't belong to us. It's been sunk since the hurricane. The only complaint that I've heard anybody say anything about to this date was that a group of motorcyclists rode down there and the barge wasn't running and they were upset. But then I think y'all put some signs up close to 19 that says barge is out, or ferry is out of order, and there's been no more complaints since. So I don't know that it would be the prudent thing to do to take the old barge and send it to Fort Gates and open up another string of liability that we never had before. Just trying to make something work that's maybe not necessary, because, and probably everybody's heard me say this, on Fort Gates, if we meet on 19 where you go off the forest road to go down to Fort Gates, and that barge is on the other side of the river at Fort Gates, and nobody knows you're coming or whatever, I'd bet you money that I could drive around and be standing on the other side when you make it in your truck on the ferry. So, you know, I think it's two different issues, and we've got them booked up here together is what we've got. I think we've got to look at it like, what do we do with the Drayton Island Ferry to continue service to the island? Do we go on and try to get bigger and better and all that, or do we leave it like it is and figure out how to redo the landings where they're good, and the maintenance to the landings? I mean, I think those are the decisions in my book that needs to be made. And then we need to look at Fort Gates separately if there's some way that we can separate them and not lose the whole thing.
Okay, let me,
Mr. Chairman,
jump in
just
here.
one comment.
Yes, sir.
On the landings. DOT is going to build the landings, but we're looking at probably late 2019 or even into 2020 before they get constructed. So we do have a time frame in there. We would have some difficulty in trying to get equipment over there.
okay. All right, well, what I wanted to do was say, as far as the road on Drayton Island, that's a separate issue right now because it's redundant unless we have the ferry working. Okay,
I
so,
do have one
okay, well, let
question
me
on
just,
the ferry, on the road.
okay, just let me go one more and make sure that I'm correct here. Fort Gates has nothing to do with this conversation today. We're talking the ferry for Drayton Island, correct?
No, not really, Mr. Chairman.
Not
If I'm
really.
Okay, so they
understanding,
are
it's-
all tied in
It's all
together.
one big deal. It's all tied up together in one big grant.
Okay, all right. all right,
If you would
let's-
allow me, I could probably try to explain the agreements that we have in place that essentially wrap Drayton Island and Fort Gates
Karen, you
together.
don't have
But just before we do that, let me go back, Mr. Pickens, go back to the basic Drayton Island Road.
Yeah, on the main road that we now are saying that we have this prescriptive right and we can do the maintenance on, which I agreed we should have been doing maintenance on it anyway. We had a meeting with Terry Suggs, Stacy Manning, Press Tompkins, and some of your staff, a month ago. What's changed? What information was produced now to change the decision after that meeting? So when I went to see the Islanders, I said that we can't maintain that road because we don't have any prescriptive rights, or we haven't done continuous maintenance or anything like that. What changed? What now was presented, and how did we get this information that I didn't have the other day?
Public Works was able to provide maintenance records that that wasn't provided to me before.
All right, well, I'm gonna go on record here. I'm not very happy as a commissioner that information wasn't provided last month. I went out and spoke to these people that are in my district. It didn't matter if they're in my district. I think it's just more important that they're in my district. And I couldn't look them in the eye because I didn't have the proper information. So I just want to go on record. I'm very disappointed at this point, and we can move on from the road. We're going to take care of this road. We're going to take care of that road. Are there any other roads that we're going to take care of, or just this main road from one end to the other end of the island?
Maintenance information has only been provided to me on that road.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, and I do agree with Commissioner Turner. I do believe we need press to bring us up on the whole scope of this project, from Fort Gates Ferry, the Drayton Island, to the landings, to the barge, all the pieces of this puzzle.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, if I may,
yes, sir, go ahead.
there are several other roads on the island
What, closer?
that are private roads. Okay, there's one other road, it's a little horseshoe road, Minwell Road, is in the county maintenance system. I have no maintenance records on that road whatsoever. Even back to '92, we have not done any maintenance on that road. Other than that, there's like 4 other roads on the island that have all been the Beacon area and that area, those are all private roads and been designated as private roads. That one road, Minwell, like I said, it's in our maintenance system as a Class 2. I have no maintenance records on it whatsoever.
On that road, without maintenance records coming from somebody, the county can't make that same claim. But that's not to say that the property owners on that road couldn't couldn't provide, deeds to the county, so that it would continue to be maintained. If it's listed as a county-maintained road, that probably should happen so that our records match what's actually, going on out there, or should be going on out there.
Right, and that should be addressed and I guess added to our map that we're going to have certified.
If we're so instructed, we can do that.
Okay.
Well, it shouldn't go on the maintenance map because we can't prove maintenance, but
correct.
it should be, we should staff should approach those property owners and ask them for deeds. If they're not willing to do so, then we need to take it off, our internal records listing it as a county road. If, we have no basis for doing so, we have no legal right to do so.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my line of questioning too. I feel Commissioner Pickens' pain because I've been out there saying what I need to say or was told to say only to find that wasn't true either. And no fault. I mean, we just need to get this thing clean once and for all. If there's a couple more roads out there that need us to do some work on them, let's do some work on them. If they're not, let's be done with them. But let's don't saddle this with the next commissioner that has to go down there and go, well, we're not really sure yet. We can be sure from this point on and take care of our records from this point on. And I think that's very important to do that. So those other two roads is what I'm talking about, the ones that are in question.
There's about 3 roads, and most of them, the ones that I saw, are like 30-foot easements. One of them I can't pronounce. It starts with an A, but anyway. Yeah.
What was it?
Anahinga, like the bird, Anahinga.
Okay. Then there's one at the very end of the Pelican Road, which we have done no maintenance on too. And then Beacon Circle and Beacon Lane was platted as a private road. And it was clearly understood that that was private.
Well, Mr. Tompkins, while I still have the floor, let me ask you this. When we talk about maintenance, are we only talking about grading? Are we talking about drainage? Are we talking about mowing? What are we talking when we?
Basically talking about grading.
But I mean, does that satisfy the state statute? Is that something, okay, we cut the grass, we pull the ditches up, is that maintaining?
I'm gonna have to let Mr.
Yes.
It is.
Yep.
Okay.
And we've got gradings, we've got right-of-way clearing, tree removal, we've got gradings, material added,
So-
gradings, clean culvert, clearing clean culvert, so.
So in a nutshell, if we went out there and mowed, that would be considered taking care of the road. If we went out there and cleaned the ditch, that would be taking care of the road. Because the road's really not in bad shape out there. I mean, they're not that bad. They're.
You haven't been down it
Well, wait a
lately.
minute, wait. I mean, compared,
It's
you
pretty
drive
bad.
around some of these areas, in comparison, Okay, so just a little bit of mowing and some drainage, we could still count that as maintaining these roads.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Yeah, particularly due to the, amount of time. I mean, we're going all the way back to 92.
Okay.
I feel very comfortable at this point being able to say, yeah, we've been maintaining that road, at least that road, for the required amount of time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm done. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
okay, so I'm glad that we got to discuss the roads, and I think it all went well for everybody, better than we could be concerned that we even thought that would go today. That is what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about the ferries and the landings and the grants and the road thing's wonderful. I'm happy. I'm glad it went that way. I truly am. But that's not what I call this to be on this agenda for today. I'd like to know about the rest of the story, to take Paul Harvey's phrase.
Like Uncle Paul said.
Okay, so you have the floor.
Okay. And this may take a while, so bear with me.
Yes,
because
sir.
It is complex, to say the least.
I can hardly hear you, Mr. Tompkins. I'm sorry.
You want me to?
Yeah, I think it'd be better if you were at the podium.
Or just pull it closer.
Is it on? There.
It's on. Okay.
Okay, there you are.
Yeah, all right. June 2012, the county entered into a joint participation agreement with the DOT for certain work to be done in conjunction with Drayton Island and Fort Gates Ferry. Okay? This grant was in the amount of $2,080,000. And it was divided into 3 projects, under one grant though, but it was 3 projects. Each one of those projects was assigned a project number. The first project number, and let me go back up, the $2,080,000 is the total amount. Putnam County was responsible for 20% of that. This is a 20% match with the joint
416,000.
participation. So it's broken down, and I'm just going to use the back 3 numbers to keep it simple, but Project 47 is for the Drayton Island Terminal improvements. That was a total funding allocated of $960,000, $768 by DOT, $192,000 by Putnam County. Project 48 was Fort Gates Ferry Terminals and Ferry Vessel Improvements. The funding was $1,020,000. DOT's portion was $816,000. Putnam County was $204,000. The third project, Project 49, was for Drayton Island Barge and Push Boat. That funding was $100,000, $80,000 DOT, $20,000 Putnam County. That was our basic agreement. It was supposed to be completed by March of 2016. We got an extension from DOT to September of 2018. Subsequent to that, in 2016, we received an amendment of the JPA where project number 49, which was the Drayton Island Barge and Push Boat, was increased by $11,539, and that is also subject to the 80-20 split. 2017, we received an additional $9,232 that was allocated to Project 49 again, subject to the 80-20 split.
Mr. Tompkins, my chairman interrupted my writing, so could you go over that amendment one more time?
Okay, the last one was
2016 amendment.
16 amendment, we received $11,539. That was subject to the 80-20 split. 17, we got another $9,232, which to Project 49, which is the Drayton Island Barge, and that was also subject to the 80-20 split. Now, all of these JPA amendments have come in front of this board, and the board has approved them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The new totals that I have worked up with the 80-20 split and the monies that we've done. Project 47, DOT's money was $768, Putnam County was $192. That one didn't change. Project 48 was $816, DOT $204,000, Putnam County. The third project, number 49, the DOT numbers went up to $116,544. Putnam County participation went to $24,135. Okay. To date, monies we have spent. Project 47, DOT has spent $284,100.37. Putnam County has spent $71,025.09. Project 48, DOT has spent $340,306.99. Putnam County has spent $85,076.75. In Project 49, DOT has spent $23,200. Putnam County has spent $5,800. Now that is the joint participation agreement. Okay, we now have a second agreement, a small county outreach program, a SCOP agreement that we entered into that was basically to build the forest roads from 19 to Fort Gates Ferry Landing and then across the ferry landing to what we call Fort Gates Ferry Road to Mount Royal. That was an amount of $2,250,000. And being a SCOP grant, there was no match required. Okay. We provided for the funds. There was a $560,000 budget set aside for the design of the roadway. And we also set aside $150,000 for the design of the landings. Now, subsequent to that, we had some situation with the Forest Service, and the decision was made that we would not pursue paving of the road on the forest side. DOT then allowed us to reallocate some of those monies around. And so far with Stone Engineering, we have about 90% plans to pave the Mount Royal Road, Fort Gates Ferry Road from Mount Royal to the landing. We have spent, Taylor Engineering was $1,108. Stone Engineering to date, we've paid $498,000. So we do have some monies left over in that particular fund. The Drayton Island barge was put out to bid. As you know, we had essentially $80,000 for the DOT budget. The rest of it was Putnam County. The lowest bid for Drayton Island barge was $178,000. There was only $71,000 left in the original total budget of $100,000. That leaves Putnam County responsible for approximately $107,000 to have the barge built. Fort Gates Terminal was designed and put out the bid. The lowest bid that came in on the terminal was $1,171,000. There was only $594,000 left from the original budget of $1.2 million for that. The engineer's estimate probable cost was $450,000. Those bids were rejected by board action. DOT has allocated approximately $4 million for rebuilding the Drayton Island terminals. This is solely DOT money with no county match. It is scheduled for construction in 2021. Now, I know that is a lot of information, a very short period of time, and I would be more than glad to try to answer any questions you may have on it.
Mr. Chairman. So there were 4 projects, 47, 48, 49, and the STOP grant.
That is correct.
Okay, 4 projects. The first project, let's take them one at a time if we could. So the first project, number 47, was originally $960. DOT share was $768, and Putnam County share was $100, and I may be off a few dollars, doesn't matter for this conversation. You say we spent $284,000 that month DOT money and $71,000 of the Putnam County's money.
Yes, sir.
What did we spend it on?
We did some emergency repairs on the island side landing approximately 2 years ago.
Okay.
And also, we did the feasibility study,
Feasibility study of what were we studying?
the landings.
Yeah, we had to find the Gotus turtles out there, gopher turtle,
Yes,
and artifacts and things in that.
right.
Historical study that went on the forest side of the road.
I'm sure that's necessary with the government. Okay, so let's move the project. So basically, we did the study, we did a feasibility study, and we did some landing repairs for the 284 and 71.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have some money left in project 47?
Yes, sir, there is some money left in that project.
Okay, how much is left without me pulling out a calculator, or did you, if you don't have that already, I can do it
I
later?
didn't have that.
Okay, I can do
And
it.
I did request from DOT, we cannot move monies around within these 3 projects. Each project, even though it is one JPA, I cannot move money from 47 to 49 or back and forth between
Okay,
those
that's
3
fine.
projects.
What can we do with project 47 money that we haven't done?
If we don't spend it, it goes back to DOT and it'll
I
be
get
reallocated.
that. What are we
to-
allowed to do with it?
That was basically to make improvements to the Drayton Island terminals.
Okay, being the landings, that's what you're
Landings,
calling
yes,
the
sir.
terminal.
Right.
Okay, so that was Drayton Island landings or terminal.
Yes, sir.
Okay, what about 48? We spent 3,
Can I add
yeah, absolutely.
something? I hate to interrupt you.
Yes,
Press, during our conversations over the last year, wasn't there a conversation between Public Works and FDOT about if you did too much maintenance on them, or went to a certain point that would jeopardize any of the other grants? Is that what I understood? I just want Ms. Turner to be up to speed on that portion.
From my understanding and what I was told and what I have gleaned from going through this is the decision by DOT to rebuild the terminals themselves came after the JPA was in effect. And you were right, we were kind of told, don't go spend a whole heck of a lot of money on the terminals, because if you do fix them to a certain extent, then we won't need to spend the $4 million to fix them. So we kind of been hesitant about what we spent. We went over there, like I said, a year and a half ago, and we did about $80,000 worth of emergency repairs to make the lanes to leave safe to get vehicles and cars back and forth on.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant.
Okay, yeah, and please, if you have any information as we go, please chime in, any one of you. I know that, Chip, I know you've been dealing with this for a long time, so, please bear with me. Project 48. We spent $340,000 DOT money and $85,000 of the county's money, and we originally had 816 and 204 respectively. If that's the case, what did that cover? What could we do with the money for Project 48?
Project 48 was for Fort Gates Terminal and ferry vessel improvements. That's what the project scope was for us to improve those terminals at Fort Gates, because the SCOP grant didn't cover the terminals. It covered the roadways to the terminals. So the DOT, the 48 money was to fix those terminals. We did the design for the terminal on the mainland side, and that's the one we put out the bid that came out so high. Then we had hired Taylor Engineering to do the feasibility study and all on the far side landing, which is what they're in the process of doing right now. But we kind of got waylaid when we got that original bid in on that terminal for that $1.1 million, when we thought it was going to be about a $400,000 or $500,000 fix.
Okay, so we spent 340 and 85 on Project 48 it was Fort Gates, and it didn't have anything to do with the roads. It had to do with the terminal, with the landings, terminals, whatever y'all, one time you call it one thing, one
Yes,
time
sir.
you call it the other. So basically the landings on each side of Fort Gates, so those have both been rebuilt with the 340 and the 85, or did they get rebuilt and then the hurricane blew them away again after the hurricane?
We never did rebuild them.
Okay, what did we spend the 340 and the 85 on for Project 48?
That was for engineering and feasibility studies.
Yes, the engineering and feasibility studies on both sides, the west and the east. And the feasibility study also
Spent
got us to 30%.
$425,000 on engineering?
Yes, sir.
The feasibility study has got us to 30% design on both sides. We proceeded with the east side because we recognized there was funding deficiencies, and so we brought that design to 100%. That was a design that was bid that come in at
1.14
1 million.
But
Okay.
you got an amendment, I need to chime in here, it's important.
Please do.
Your SCOP agreement, you had amended and used monies from it. You didn't mention that just then.
Yes, that's to complete the west side.
So it went to the west side. So that $340,000 on the west side, is that right?
East side.
Okay, the money on the west side primarily came from the SCOP funds that were redirected.
I
No,
think
we are just now moving forward with the design on the west side.
Commissioner
We're at
Lible,
30% on the west side from the initial feasibility study.
you're gonna have me confused if we keep this up.
Well, I just got confused because
I
they
know
did
what-
say they
and-
used it.
And I think if I understood correctly, there was 3 of them, then the STOP grant, and then the 5th project, which is the 4 million coming later on. So I'm trying to go down and see what each one of them were used on, and then at the end, if we don't understand, maybe we could all get unconfused
I
if we're
just
not
felt-
thoroughly confused by the
All right.
time we get there. So
Well,
I
just-
think the STOP grant was the 4th it wasn't numbered, it was just called the STOP grant, which is the
Yes, sir.
fourth out of the 5 projects, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that money they used, we'll get to it in a minute, because they never told us how much of that they've used yet when they went through
Okay. All
through
right,
their
got ahead.
stuff, so,
But can I,
yeah. Mhm.
okay. So the Scott Grant number 4 project, $2.25 million. That was to do the west road from 19 down to the landing.
Yes, sir.
And do the east side from there to Mount Royal, correct?
correct.
But we can only do the east side from the landing to Mount Royal. We can't do the west side.
That's correct.
Okay, so may I?
Please let me get back in order.
okay.
I'm trying to do this in a way to where we might understand the presentation when we actually got done. And if I'm not smart enough to keep jumping back and
No, I
forth.
got
I got to have it in some kind of order here and try to understand it. So basically, Project 48 was for Fort Gates. None of the money's been spent on actually driving nails
No, sir.
or turning dirt. The only thing that's been spent is engineering.
That is correct.
So we spent, okay. So then, Project 49 was for the barge,
Yes, sir.
okay? And, let's see, we've spent so far, I realize we ordered the barge, but it's on hold at the moment, the new barge. That was just for the new barge. But basically, we have $107,000 of that barge we've got to pay for, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then the rest of the 80 that's left or whatever is what DOT agreed to put in for the barge.
Yes, sir.
If we build a new barge.
Yes, sir, that is
So
correct.
basically, that's not a 80-20 split, that's us 107 and that's them 80. Because it
Because of the
didn't,
way
it
the
came in
grant-
over budget.
Yes, because it came in way over budget, we were responsible for any monies over the budget amount.
Okay, and then that was just to cover the price of the barge.
Yes, sir.
That money, I mean,
Yes, sir.
that grant, number 49. Okay, and then we got the stopgap grant. Is that correct, the right
It's-
name?
It's SCOP.
SCOP
Small
grant.
County Outreach Program is SCOP.
Okay, it's SCOP, okay, thank you,
Small County Outreach Program.
thank you. So the SCOP grant that we had was, $2.25 million. So out of that, how much have we spent?
We have spent right at $500,000 of it.
Okay,
We spent 1,000 to Taylor and almost 500,000 to Stone Engineering for the roadway design.
so we spent $500,000 on engineering on the SCOP grant. We haven't actually driven a nail or turned any dirt on that either.
No, sir, we have not.
Okay, and I thought we paved part of that road. Somebody was telling me is this Drayton Island or Fort Gates?
Fort Gates.
Okay, so the SCOP grant is Fort Gates.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, and we haven't paved anything or done anything there yet. All we've done is paid for some engineering.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay,
Well,
so out of all this money we've spent, 500,000 at Fort Gates, 425,000 on Project 48, and the barge, which is currently on hold, and the 284 on Project 47 for the Drayton Island Terminal, that was all just engineering also.
yes, sir.
So we've spent 5, 6, 7, 8. We spent over $1 million on engineering. We ain't even turned a damn shovel full of dirt yet on none of this.
That is correct. I mean, the only actual work we did, the emergency repairs we did on the Drayton Island ferry landing terminal on the island side.
My goodness. Does some of y'all want to comment where I can calm
Well-
down a minute before I do?
Okay, Commissioner Lible?
I think Mike Nimitz should speak to the regulatory part of this to DOT. They're not handing us checks without this engineering, if I'm correct here.
That is correct.
So defend yourself.
That's correct. Everything that has been produced so far, design-wise, feasibility study-wise, permitting, everything has been vetted by DOT. These are all requirements. I know these designs may seem excessive in price, but you just can't write up a detail on a bar napkin and go build it. It doesn't work that way with DOT. These plans have extensive requirements, and you have to adhere to them. We have not circumvented any of the requirements. We have followed the rules accordingly. I know it seems expensive, but that is what it costs.
And it's fair to say, 05 or 06, none of you were here, but they were here. And we did a sloppy job on the landings. And did they last? No. I remember it well. So they are being correctly done at this time. And when we get them done, it's going to take a while. But we did basically go over with a crew, a dock building crew, and do what best we had money for. But it didn't last at all.
And these landings that are being designed and constructed, well, at least the ones by DOT and the ones that we have designed, are precast concrete with hot dip galvanized steel. These are not wood pilings like you see stick framed on the back of someone's house. These are pretty intensive. There's a lot to engineering and fabrication. It's the best of the best is what you're getting.
And let me say this too, is, we're going through design, DOT oversees everything we do because it's their money too. We had to go through cultural assessment studies. We had to go through all the NEPA documentation to get this money. It's not just, drawing a few figures on a sheet of paper. It's a lot of pre-app, a lot of permitting we had to go through with that. We've had to go through, on Fort Gates Ferry Road, we've had to go through the Forest Service and get an easement from the state through the TIF agreement, because part of that road is on state property. We had to go through the architectural review with them. In fact, James is going to Tallahassee Friday to the ARC Board meeting to get the final clearance on that easement. That took 4 months to do. It's a tremendously involved process that we have to go through to meet all the state requirements.
Well, I got the floor real quick.
Yes, sir.
Out of the two and $2.25 million SCOP dollars, they didn't give you all of that though to put onto the ferry terminals, did they?
No, they did not.
What
In fact,
percentage did you get of that?
well, the SCOP grant was for the roadway.
Right.
We've still got $800 and some thousand sitting in that grant. Okay, they would not let us move that money around. We called DOT and said, hey, we're not going to build, we're not going to pave the far side of the road. We stopped those plans at 90%. We did not proceed forward with those. We spent additional monies on the east side of Mount Royal Road, what I call Mount Royal Road area. But there's the money's about $800,000 left in that grant that we cannot move around right now.
What was the original amount of the grant?
$2,250,000.
So, okay, it was.
But you
that
got
amount.
to understand, 84% of that grant was designated for the forest side. It's what, Mike, 5-point-something miles of road on the forest side. There's like 1 mile of road on Fort Gates Ferry side, on the Mount Royal side. So
In these feasibility studies, for instance, the one for the actual ferry terminals, these documents are 1.5 inches to 2 inches thick. They're several hundred pages long. They go into the historical background of these things back to, I guess, from inception through to where we're at to date. There's magnetometric readings of the floor of the St. Johns River, every square inch of it. I mean, these are all things that I agree with you. I think it's, in my opinion, it's excessive to put something, just build something. But it's a requirement. We can't get around it. There's nothing, you're not going to, if you're going to play in this game, you got to play by the rules. It's that simple. And that's what we're having to do.
Commissioner
Well,
Locke.
it's funded and it's built to DOT standards. Find that value. I mean, it's taken longer, but we won't have to go back with a dock building crew and patch things up for a long, long time once we get through this.
yeah, absolutely.
So it'll be a DOT standard road.
Yes. All this is being built to DOT weight standards and weight limits that was specified.
Okay, so we just gotta come up with the correct barges to move equipment on and off the island is the biggest obstacle here.
Yes.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you. Mr. Tompkins, I have a couple questions. Since we've established there's 5 funding things here, and the last one being Drayton Island, 2021, is that what I heard, or 2020?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's $4 million.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's 4 landings, correct?
That's for both landings, both
That's
sides.
for both
of it.
landings.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to override number 47 to the point where there's going to be money left on 47 because the number 5 is going to come over top of that?
That is correct.
That
Because
is
there's
correct.
monies left in there, but we didn't want to spend monies to improve the landings to the point that DOT did not want to go in there and spend the $4
Gotcha.
million to bring them to a higher standard than what we could build with these monies.
Okay, that answers one. And the second thing is, out of the 2.2 million, item number, the SCOP grant,
Yes,
okay? You said there's 800,000 that was dedicated for the west side of the road that we're not doing now.
that is,
I remember sitting in a transportation meeting that you had concerns whether we even owned that property down at the Fort Gates landing area. Do we own that now? Have we,
what we determined, and this is what we brought up at the transportation meeting, the majority of the road, the part, I'm gonna say the north side of the road, or was actually within the state-owned property.
okay,
That's what we were referring to, that we had to go to the state and get permission, their easement, their TIF easement, to cross state lands.
now, let me ask you this, and, well, I still have the floor, and I really like the idea of having the oldest barge in Florida still being operable. But it might not be feasible anymore. And how do we get out of this if we need to? Because, you know, we've already determined that the state of Florida gave us money for a road that we didn't own. The audit proved that. And now we've had to come back and go, and now the forest ranger out there, I don't want any more asphalt in the forest.
Right.
You know, and Congressman Yoho stepped in, but we haven't got any results out of that one as far as forcing them to allow us, and even if they forced them to allow us to do it, we don't have the money to do it. 5 miles for 800,000 is not enough. So we'll just turn that money back over to the state of Florida? Is that what we're?
That's basically, it goes back into the DOT pot and it gets reallocated in next year's budget.
You know what bothers me, and this is no fault of Putnam County, I'm gonna say that. DOT really should have never gave us that money to pave the west side of the forest when they knew we didn't own that road. I mean, that should have been, guys, y'all don't own it and you can't do what you're fixing to try to do.
Well, I will say this in answer to that, recently, in the last 3 months, DOT has informed us, before we submit any application for any more DOT money, we have to show that we own the right-of-way out route.
Well,
That
that's a
is-
novel idea, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
want to say
Chairman.
this, and I'm not using this as an excuse.
No,
but-
I get it.
But the three of us sitting here, we inherited all these
I
projects.
know you did. I know you did. And
And
I
we
know
are
you-
trying to do our best with what we inherited. It took me a week systematically going through these JPAs and monies we got, monies we spent to try to put this documentation together.
One last thing. Can we get a copy of what you read a minute ago?
Absolutely.
Okay, if you can provide that. I've made my notes and I'm somewhat close to the numbers you gave, but, you know, thank you, and I got a better understanding, but I'd really like that document. I
Commissioner
yield the
Turner?
floor, sir. Thank you.
I didn't mean to aim it at you,
No, I don't
the
take it personally.
disparity
I
of the
understand.
engineering or whatever, just some, I've been doing this over 30 years and it still makes me scratch my head some days, so I didn't mean that disparagingly toward
No,
y'all.
we did
but,
not take it that way, Commissioner.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, on project, I'm gonna try to completely split these out. Drayton Island, Fort Gates.
Yes, sir.
To me, they're totally different games here. Drayton Island, how much money do we have that we can spend on repairing the landings to make that barge that we now have run? I assume that's project 47,
Project
Drayton
40
Island Terminal.
Project 47, we have spent approximately $350,000 to date. And project
Of 868 of my, or of 960.
Okay. Money spent on 47, which is the Drayton, is,
Yeah, we had 960 and we spent 284 and 71, so
yeah,
we got basically $600,000,
that is correct.
okay? And of that, we only got to pay like 39,000 or something, cause we paid 71 of 100 that we were supposed to pay, and,
Right.
okay, so we basically got, we basically have liability for spending $31,000 to put $500,000 of the state's money into these two landings. How much can we put in and not blow up the $4 million deal in 2020?
That is a question I don't know. I'd have to try to get some type of answer from DOT, but they did caution us about that, you know, don't go hog wild. Because like I said, the SCOP grant, I mean, that money, the DOT money for the landings came about after this JPA was in effect.
Well, I thought the Scott money was Fort Gates money.
I'm sorry, I said the
Okay,
DOT money, the 4 million DOT money came about after
Okay.
we had entered into this JPA.
Okay, well, for the sake of this conversation, at the current, the conversation, if we could try to talk about Drayton Island,
Yes, sir.
and then we'll talk about the Fort Gates in a minute. So 48, Project 48 was all Fort Gates, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then Project 49 was just covered the barge,
That
if we
is-
build a new barge.
That is correct.
And push boat.
And the push
It was
boat.
barge and or push boat.
And or push boat.
Okay.
Okay.
The SCOP grant was Fort Gates.
Yes, sir.
And then the 4 million, have they already committed to a $4 million
Yes,
grant
sir.
in 2020?
Yes, sir. they
It's
have.
for new landings.
Yes, it is. That's for new landings on Drayton Island on both sides, mainland and island side. That is in their work program for 2021.
Okay, what kind of shape is the current barge in that's running at Drayton Island? I realize it's not as heavy as what we'd like or whatever, I get it, but what, will it haul your cars across? Will it haul things? I know that you can't haul a concrete truck across, but somehow those 20, 30 houses on Drayton Island got built. So I don't know, I've roofed several of them houses in my roofing business. We had to hire a barge to carry our stuff over because we couldn't get it back and forth. So I understand that it's a problem and an issue, but is the current barge good enough? Yes or no?
FDOT is coming in for 77,000 pounds.
Say it again, I'm sorry, I don't hear well, I'm old.
That's all right, FDOT is coming in to build your structure for 77,000 pounds. You have a barge, in my opinion, that is somewhere around 38,000 pounds. The forestry dozer is 40,000 pounds. We have taken him over twice, 2 fires on the island since I've been there. Without doing an incline test on the barge, you're going by my best guess, okay? 40,000 pounds is a little, it's pushed down. I mean, I would honestly venture to say that's about it. You have Clay Electric that has 38,000 pound vehicles. They're much larger, they're bigger, and they're a little scarier, to put on there. And I'm not saying it can't be done, but when you need a particular water line, that's legal to go across, you have to be careful what you're putting on there. So without the new barge, what's the point of 77,000 pound landings if you don't have a new barge?
Well, I don't disagree with that statement whatsoever. I don't know that we need 77,000 pound landings on there, but I don't know that DOT will let us do anything else because they look at this like it's a bridge. And if you don't get to a certain standard, they won't fund it at all. And that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of here is how we can keep the ferry running to Drayton Island, fix the landing some, which is I don't remember which person, it may have been one of y'all or somebody else actually made the comment to me one day that this all started out by y'all came and requested your landings be worked on some. And it went from landings to a $2 million mess that I'm having trouble figuring out what's even going on, and I bet none of y'all knew about all this either until today. Bits and pieces here and there, you know, and so, you know, I think that, that's why I'm asking the question. If you got by with the barge that you had right now, we've got $500,000, unless I've missed something in Project 47 here. We've got $500,000 to $600,000 we can go down and spend on the 2 landings on Drayton Island on Project 47. Will
Yes,
that not shore those $500,000 won't shore up them landings good enough for the people to get their cars and pickup trucks and what have you on like they've done forever back and forth across that river?
Yes, sir, it will. But I just want to caution you, the more work we do on those landings, DOT could pull the funding for the $4 million. That's why we've been kind of skeptical of doing a lot of repair work on those landings, so we would not jeopardize the $4 million to have the DOT landings put in.
And what are they gonna do exactly with the $4 million?
They're gonna build, like Mike said, they're building concrete reinforced landings. They're not timber landings, and they're capable of carrying 77,000 pounds. I don't know if we could, in all honesty, rebuild or repair those landings to that caliber. We may be able to get another 10 or 15,000 pounds out of them by rebuilding portions of them, but we're not gonna get close to the 77,000 pounds. I think they're rated around, I wanna say 30 or 40,000 pounds right now. Is that much?
Well, the one with the augers that got, you know, they put these little augers in to kind of beef up the substructure on the island side, and that took us to 20,000 pounds,
Yeah.
because we were really at 8,000 pounds.
Maybe I could back up a step. Not communicating well today, evidently. With the current barge, ferry, whichever, current ferry that they've been using for years is seaworthy, I understand. And so we're gonna build a new barge. I mean, we're talking about building a new barge. It's gonna cost $107,000 more dollars.
That's correct.
In order for us to get a $4 million grant and put in a sure enough barge landing at each side like would be up at Mayport Ferry or something instead of on Drayton Island, 77,000 pound concrete structure ferry. So y'all really want, y'all want a concrete ferry landing like at Mayport? Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I know that I shouldn't have done that, but I mean, I've got to ask some questions
Yeah,
here,
we'll-
because this just
we'll
isn't
hold this
making
off for
sense
a
to me
minute.
at all.
Okay, so, for sake of discussion, what you're saying is, we might want to just step back from,
Yeah, we got 500,000 left in number 47 to go down there and repair it. Somebody told me, and I don't remember who it was, that's what started this whole discussion back a year or 2 or 3 ago, was they needed some landing repairs done. And it went from that to one step further, and now all of this. Now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects, and the next one could be worth $4 million, as long as we don't go down there and spend too much of the last one they gave us, we just leave it out there. I mean, and I'm trying to just hold this on the Drayton Island side here. I mean, I think that's one decision that needs to be made coming out of here. Do we build a new barge or not? Because if they bring a new barge down here, then, we voted to build it, but it's been put on hold, is my understanding at the moment. And it's not fair to that contractor that's building that barge for us not to resolve that issue, I think, today, one way or the other. Either build a new barge or not build a new barge. And so, and if we do that, then I don't know they can use the new barge with the existing landings, because it's gonna be higher out of the water and wider and bigger, and can they even use the new barge once it's built, Press?
Karen, can we use the new barge? you're still limited by the weight limit on the landings to a certain extent. I mean, if they're rated at 20,000, we probably exceeded that several times, but
The width is a little different. We're 18 wide, we're gonna go, new one would be 22, so there would be.
New one's 40 by 70, the new barge.
No,
Oh?
it's 60 by 22.
I thought you told me it's 40 by 70.
no, 60 by 22.
60 by 22. So there's a slight change in the corner. We'd have to probably get rid of a piling in order to get it in there. But for the most part, yes, I mean, you should use some of the funds that you have to bring the piles out a little bit, so you've got 60-foot of piles down the slide, not 40-foot. You know what I mean? You'd need to extend your slide a little and then be able to get in and move one piling or so. So you'd have to spend a little bit of that other money in order to get that in there. But yes, you could. You could figure it out.
I'll stop for a minute. I'm gonna study it a minute.
I'm
in
gonna
my
hand this
head.
over to Commissioner Harvey.
Down there too.
All right. A couple questions. Karen, what's your license ability? Are you able to carry that over there? Because I think at one time you and I had that conversation.
That was the yes, no, 100-ton, that's not, the Coast Guard dictates this as a six-pack. So it could be huge, it wouldn't matter. They're dictating it's a six-pack, and they're dictating it's a six-pack license because you're uninspected.
Okay.
All right, once you're uninspected, six, period, the end. It doesn't, you can have a six-pack license, you could have a 200-ton or 500-ton, doesn't matter. The tonnage comes into where if I had a passenger vessel for 150 people and it was a tonnage size, then I would need a 100-ton license to take that out, okay? But this is just a six-pack, period, and you guys aren't looking to have it inspected, so that's the criteria.
Now, let me press this while I have the floor. I understand Commissioner Turner's concern, and I'm glad you brought all this up because it really cleared the air today. But are we better off allowing DOT to do the concrete bulkheads and get, because it seems like when they do their thing in 2020, we will never talk about this issue again.
We should not ever talk about it again when they finish, but let me bring one point. This JPA agreement with this money expires in September of this year.
That's on,
That's on 47, 48, and 49.
okay, so but Commissioner Turner would like to bring that plane in for a landing on 49 today.
Yes, sir.
And I agree with that we need to get these planes down. So with that, you're talking, let me go really quick, 22 by 60 barge, and we're over budget by $107,000 on that barge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And DOT will not allow us any taking from there to go. Okay, thank you. I will yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lible?
Refresh our memories on the Fort Gates barge, the condition of it, where it is, and
Bottom of the river?
compare it to,
It's a little smaller. It's about a 40 by 15. It was damaged in the storm. It got beat up, and it had a pretty thin skin as it was.
question answered, thank you. I appreciate
She's
it, Karen.
done.
I was hoping for a better answer.
My understanding is we did not own that barge at Fort Gates.
I thought he owned the boat and we had the barge.
I
No?
think he owned the barge also.
Okay.
He did get it refloated, but it did have significant damage to it.
We put a bottom on it one time.
I think that was the Drayton.
Drayton, shortly
That
before
was
I
the
got
Drayton.
Okay. All right. I'm not the chairman, but this fellow's been
Hold
sitting
on.
there a long time.
My name is
Mr.
Lee
Pickens.
Doust. I'm at 248
Wait,
Drayton
excuse me,
Island
wait a
Road.
minute, Lee.
And
Lee,
Hang
Lee,
on a second, Lee.
please hold on.
Before you start. That's where I was at with this, because, and I'm glad we're having these conversations. I think it's opened up some information for everybody. It's probably answered a lot of questions. But if we're gonna go and allow them to build, those landings, and we won't have to mess with them ever again, barring a catastrophe. And then I know it's a lot of money on the barge, but then you would not have to worry about a barge that was underrated for taking stuff over there, like firefighting equipment, construction equipment, those type things. So that's where I am. But anyway, go ahead, Lee. I'm sorry.
I agree with you, Commissioner Pickens.
The one thing I see when we're talking about a lot of these grants, and we have this September 30th deadline, is that when I looked at the contract for,
Pull
let's say,
that closer to
I'm
you,
sorry.
I can't hear you.
When I looked at the contracts, or I should say the bid documents for the barge, and unfortunately it did go way over budget, I understand that. But, one of the things it talked about for the barge was it took 4 months to schedule and build. I know that, maybe there could be a way that we could go back and look at the barge, see where we could save money on maybe some design aspects of it. I know that with these grants, and when we go over something like $25,000, that they actually have to go back and rebid. I did talk with the barge designer a little bit and asked, what could we do to try and save some money? And at one point, we were just really talking about the tonnage, because I think that was a point where everybody kind of said 77,000 pounds. And we just ballparked and said, okay, let's say we go 20 tons. What would the savings be? And he said possibly 20, maybe $30,000. I said, in your contract, are you in there with Putnam County, do you have any redesign costs? He goes, no. So he said redesign would be $17,000 just to do the redesign. And then we would have to go out to bid. Just for my looking at it, 2.5 weeks for redesign, go out to bid 30, 60 days possibly, and then 4 months to build. We're out of time. And then on your note, where, okay, let's maybe see about rebuilding these landings. Here again, that's a large percentage of money, so that would probably also have to go out to bid, but we'd have to design and figure out how we can fix these landings. And then secondly, take it out to bid and then construct them before we can, get that. And unfortunately, we're, here again, we might not be able to get it done in time to where we lose the grant, and then all of a sudden, now we have to pay for it all or pay for that last final share. Now, could there be an avenue, maybe we save some money on the backside of the barge, meaning get it started being built and then possibly save some money in the end? Well, there's some ideas on paint. They were talking about coal tar epoxy, bottom paint, and possibly, towing it down here. And there could be a savings where we could find somebody else, maybe get a cheaper contract to get it down here. Still, we're not talking a lot. We're talking thousands of dollars, probably not tens of thousands of dollars. The other aspect would be to try and, go after another grant after the fact. But that's not a sure thing. FDOT, in my opinion, or I should say, when I was talking to them, they got these plans for our new barge about 6 months ago. They're at 60% right now. So they've been designing them for this width, height. They do the landings and everything. And it's also based upon that barge, taking about a foot of water. So I don't know what would happen if they find out that, okay, can you redesign for the old barge? So I know they're going down the road based upon the opinion that this type and size of barge was going to be designed that way. Another aspect is that, but I don't know the time frame, I can't see the time frame, is that this barge was designed to be Coast Guard approved. At this particular time, it's not going to be under. We want to stay underneath that radar because it costs a lot of money to maintain it. But apparently the county also talked about it being able to be Coast Guard approved if they saw a need for it in the future. There could be savings there. But maybe one of the big savings could be is that maybe not redesigning it, but that there's also inspections that are done supposedly as the barge is being built. And with those inspections, welds, et cetera, maybe if we say, okay, to the manufacturer that's building it, is that we're not going to want to go Coast Guard approved. And there could be some savings there. here again, I don't know how much, but I just feel that, that this barge needs to move forward because it has this little ripple effect. And while the other idea would be to rebuild the wooden structures and try and use our existing ferry or barge, you know, we might not even have enough time to use that money now.
Okay, thanks. I think what we're trying to figure out here, if I'm not far out of line, did you have a question there? But I
Go
think
ahead.
what it is, Commissioner Turner basically was just wanting to know, can we continue with what we've got and what repairs it take, or do we want to go ahead and go to the full concrete pilings, nice new barge? I think that's what we're going. Which avenue are we trying to canoe down?
Well, that's true, and let me say this, we went through a very extensive design period on the barge. Karen was very active with us on what we could take across there, what would work with the way she operates the barge. We went through that. We actually hired a naval architect to design it to the DOT standards that was specified in the grant. DOT reviewed the design specs. We went through as much value engineering as we could on it to meet the minimum requirements that they had put on us, plus the requirements that we were looking for to be able to carry the type of equipment we were looking to try to carry it over. So, I mean, that's where we were with the barge. And I'll be very candid with you, I don't know where we came up with the $100,000 for the barge when we applied for the grant in 2012. I wasn't here. I don't know how they'd come up with those dollars. DOT was very emphatic about it. The JPA says anything over budget, the county is responsible for. We talked to DOT. They were fully aware that the barge came in over budget. They said that was fine, but they were building their landings to their specifications, which is the 77,000 pounds. We needed to have a barge that was capable of carrying what we needed to carry over there.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I don't think it's an option here to redesign or rebid or do whatever. That's just not an option. We signed contracts with these people. We haven't given them a notice to proceed yet, but we signed contracts with them. So it's a matter, do we pay the $107 grand and move forward, or do we not pay the $107 grand? That's the only option here there is.
That is
So
correct.
let's try to get back onto what's really what we're talking about today and try to get focused if we can. Two issues, Drayton Island, Fort Gates. Do we continue with Drayton Island? If we do, then we need to, sometime very shortly,
Yes,
we
sir.
need to go out there and take some of that 47 money and fix that landing good enough to where this new barge can pull up there and go to work. Now, I've forgotten your name, the captain, if you don't mind me calling you captain. Karen, I'm sorry. Could you walk back up here a minute? I didn't mean to cut you short, Lee. Were you about done, or?
I am, but it's just that we do have, there has been talk, I guess, with FDOT about a temporary, there has been talk about making a small temporary fix where it's like a steel plates, okay? So we wouldn't be like ripping up all the old wood and putting it down there, but it would be a plate that would go over, it would span the area that, where the beams are and where the auger piles were put in years ago. And that should get us enough time until 2021.
Okay. Before we make this decision, I need to throw another wrench in the works here. I think if the county's gonna spend $107,000 additional dollars for a barge, they've already spent out of this $8.25 million, including the 4 that's coming at us in the future, which is, by the way, $6 million more than I thought we were talking about before this meeting today. So basically, if we're gonna spend all this money, that's not the end of it. The end of it is somebody's got to pay for the maintenance of this thing over the next indefinite period of time while this is working. I would like to know from some of the residents while they're here, and it can't be out in the audience, you'll have to come up to the microphone, what you think about the idea of putting an MSBU over there, just like in Interlochen. When they want to go to Interlochen and they want to pave a road in an area or do anything, then they put it in the MSBU and they pay part of it every year when they pay taxes. So what I'd like to know is, do the residents that live on Drayton Island, are they willing to come forward and pay a portion of the maintenance fees and the operating costs of this barge going forward? If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like for them to come up and address that issue.
I'm only one resident of the island, and I don't think that the group that's here today can speak for the entire island. There are many, many property owners, and everyone's situation is different. So I don't think any of us can answer your question today. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I appreciate that answer anyhow. But that's kind of the way I wanted, that I feel like it ought to be done. I truly do. I mean, if the county's gonna spend $107,000 and they've already spent 71, now this is just Drayton Island, they spent 71, the county spent 71 on project 47, and the Scott grant didn't cost, well, that was Fort Gates, so Drayton Island, that one didn't cost, and the barge, we've already spent some money towards the barge, because no matter what happens, we're gonna have to pay the cost that contractors incurred to date, whether we do it or not. So, so basically, we're gonna have a couple of $100,000 at the very minimum here of other people's tax, along with yours, but taxpayer dollars in this project. Now, I know that it's an important project for the people that live on Drayton Island, and I'm not advocating that we stop. But don't you think it's only fair that if you're gonna be using that you pay at least part of the operating costs? If we put in a barge and we put in the landings and we got more landings coming in the future, don't you think it's fair that you pay, and I'm just chunking numbers, but $10 or $15 a month per lot to go towards the operating costs, because that won't cover them, but at least you'd be paying part of the operating costs.
I understand where you're coming from. I think it's also an idea that, we're just finding out now that I think the county realizes that this is a county road. And, in all aspects, the ferry is pretty much a water road. It goes across. If it was land all the way across, it'd be a dirt road. If it was a canal, it'd be a small bridge. If it was a ditch, we'd have a culvert. It truly is just, it's a road. And now it is county road to county road. I just feel that when we see that we have this new grant money, and I understand it's a lot of money, but the feasibility study that we initially had done on the thing goes into talking about timber piles, concrete, and then concrete pilings. And it talks about, it was like 20, 30, 50-year lifespan. So they were saying that the concrete was a 50-year lifespan. Now, I know when I went on the island, we didn't even have the ferry. It was upside down, being welded on. And I've seen, and that was when we actually had 5 days a week. And slowly but surely, I think property values are going down in value. So I look at this as an aspect that, this infrastructure being brought in will probably stimulate the island, probably allow for more growth. We just had 2 houses being built, which were pretty hard considering everything that had to happen. But, this could really stimulate, get everything going. Also, our island is like all the way around is almost all lakefront property. So it's a little bit more valuable than inland land. Inland land, we're seeing a lot of areas getting paved and everything like that. We're not asking paved. We're fine with the dirt road. We just want a little maintenance on that. So,
Lee, I'm not for a minute suggesting you aren't correct, But if you were going from dirt to pavement and you weren't included in the Better Place Plan annual paving contract, you'd be in an MSBU, because we got them all over this county. Everybody that wanted their roads paved and they weren't willing to wait till sometime in the future to get them paved, if they ever got them paved, they formed an MSBU. And they started putting in a little bit extra money every year, and they started paving their own roads. So I'm not asking you to pay to have your road maintained. I'm not asking for any of that. I'm asking that if the tax-paying citizens, including y'all of this county, have to put money in this, then why wouldn't it be fair for y'all to just pay part of the operating costs and the maintenance going forward on the thing? I'm not asking to turn it over to your homeowners association and make you cough up the money or it doesn't run. I'm not asking that at all. I'm asking that somebody participate, just like if you were on dry land, you would have to participate in an MSBU or you wouldn't get your road paved.
I understand. I think as an island as a whole, they'd have to look at that and vote on it, and I think it would also be something that would have to be, 100% like an MSBU, correct?
Oh, I think that'd have to be 100%.
And also, we'd have to look at an avenue
Chairman,
of
just-
as far
Sorry,
as
Mr.
people
Chairman.
how
Sorry,
much
Mr.
property each
Harvey.
person owns.
No problem.
Okay, just a second. Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, I have a few things, and I need to clean something up. One, before we go much further, let's go back to the barge.
Yes, sir.
Let's just say today we decide we're going forward on the new barge, and we're gonna wait for the new landings in 2020-21. Okay? Will that barge work with that new landing?
Oh, absolutely.
So we'll never talk, probably ever, unless some unforeseen thing. Okay. Now I need to clean up on something else. I think before we have a talk about MSBU, we need to to know what the cost of maintenance was. Going back to the president of the landowners of Interlochen Lake Estates, the reason we formed a MSBU was we didn't feel we could wait the 7-8 week cycle anymore. The original MSBU was for the county to take their graders off the road and run. It was for additional. Well, that's not what happened. Once that MSBU was established, the county left those MSBU areas. The first MSBU was Hollister in Commissioner Goddard's district, was the Hoover Road pavement. And that's the only way they could get pavement. And I was at that meeting. They like to kill John Eubanks and John Thompson and Sam Taylor. I mean, it was a pretty contentious meeting but you couldn't find Hoover Road. It was just all over the place, if you remember back in those days. Now, to clean one thing up, we, in my area, went from dirt to pavement on MSBU, unforeseen 1 year before the sales tax took into account. So we got booted out, and for so many years, we think this is last year, we're paying our last $215 payment for pavement. 2 years ago, it was proven by the attorneys, Neighbors, Gibbons, and Dickerson, that we can, and you are, looking at roads inside of MSBU because the people, number one, are paying MSBU and they're paying sales tax. They have a right to compete for that sales tax money just like somebody who's not paying sales tax.
That is correct.
I mean, MSBU. So my point is, I don't think you can just look at it like you got to form an MSBU if you want this. We probably need, before we have that conversation, need to know the cost of maintenance of that. And I think that's the big key that I'd be interested in. Not taking anything away from the conversation, because I'm going to tell you, this is the best conversation we've had since I've been here, Mr. Turner, and I'll tell you that. We have whittled this stick down to where it's at now, and appreciate y'all coming. But we need to know the maintenance cost, because today, we're gonna make a decision, do we go forward with that barge?
Yes, sir. I can tell you, we have a contract with Karen to operate the Drayton Island barge. We pay her $25,000 a year, plus $5,000 towards her insurance. She collects the fees that are actually going across the island. In 16, she collected $8,000. 17, she collected $6,985. And so far in 18, she's collected $840.
She's not collecting a whole lot more than
That goes to her, but we do pay $30,000 a year for the operation of that barge. Drayton Island, Fort Gates, we pay Mr. Hackett, we pay him $1,200 a month to operate that ferry, and he keeps the proceeds. So those are the maintenance costs.
Do we have what maybe would be, let's just say in a perfect world, the barge is here, it's working. Do we have some number in our mind that would be the maintenance cost of that barge? Because we already determined, once DOT does this in 2020, there's no maintenance cost ever on that unless some catastrophic event happens. So we're pretty good on the landings. So we're just talking barge now.
Commissioner, I can't give you a definite maintenance on the barge. I would assume that, like any vessel, it's going to have to be pulled out every 3 to 5 years and the bottom scraped, cleaned, probably repainted. You could be looking at $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for that to be done. I don't have those type of figures, but the maintenance on that type of vessel would have to be done. It is going to have to be probably Coast Guard inspected. I just got a generic letter from the Coast Guard yesterday about inspecting the push boats.
So it could be safe to say that we would be, for this overwater highway that you referred to, where's Lee, that you referred to, this overwater highway would cost us about $40,000 a year, $30,000 to Karen because of her cost and insurance, and if that doesn't go up, plus put some money away for cleaning the bottom and some repairs.
Yes.
So we're looking at one road in this county, Water Road, costing us about am I right? Okay. $50,000 a year in work.
Right. And be
Do we
very,
have any other road?
we don't have
that
any other
cost
roads
us
that we
for-
spend that kind of money on. That's what I think what Commissioner Turner was
That's
getting
exactly
at.
where I'm going with this. I'm
Right.
trying
We
to bring
don't-
this
Right.
mule back into the barn. So we don't have another road that costs us $40,000 to $50,000 a year to maintain.
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you don't mind, what do we spend now? Is that about what we spend for our existing barge and maintenance?
We have a contract with Karen, it's $30,000 a year. We have a
Plus-
contract with Fort Gates person also. That's what
Right.
we spend. Now, it was before my time, but, and Karen, maybe to help me, but I think the barge was what they call reskinned here, maybe, 10 years? 9.5, 10 years, we actually.
Somebody told me 171, but I don't know that to be accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
She needs to be at the podium.
Oh, yeah.
Karen, I don't mean to keep making you walk back up here. All I can see is this out there. I can't hear a word you're
Lips are
saying.
moving, huh?
It's hard. You'd be surprised at how hard it is to hear up here. You
That's
would think
okay.
it would
That's
all
okay.
come to us, but it doesn't.
That's
Well,
okay.
plus, I need
there's
hearing aids.
two ways of taking out that size of a barge. You'd either have to roll it up on like ways, or in some cases, you might be able to cradle it. If it's cradleable on like something that they could bring out and put up where we could all get out there and paint it, that's much cheaper. But if you have to bring it out on ways and then it gets jacked up and the facility has to paint it, well, it's far more expensive. But if you could bring it out, which I think, that'd be a question for maybe the engineer structurally, if it would hold up in a cradle, and then they just block it up, you pressure wash it, you clean it, you might do that every other year. The barge will last a fairly long time. But you gotta be willing to put the coal tar epoxy on there and get it done. It's expensive, but I mean, you might spend $5,000 every other year to keep it painted. But without doing that, you're spending a lot of money that you should take care of.
But what are we spending per year now?
Nothing.
Okay, so we're not maintaining the
Well,
ferry
I
now?
mean, you spent a lot of money right before I got here. You spent quite a bit of money to put a new bottom on because it was shot. But the steel's only going to last so long, and all that had on there is primer. So the barge today only has primer on it. It should be pulled and should have some black tar
So
epoxy.
that's what I was getting to. If we continue with the barge you have, we still got a maintenance.
Yes, you do.
It's going to have a yearly maintenance. Maybe it'll be less than what the larger barge would be, but it's still going to be
Minimal.
right on in
It'll
there,
be
right.
minimal because they're.
And the operation is still the same.
Yes.
So the cost of operating the older one and the cost of running the new one are almost, the newer one is a little bit more, but it's about equal.
I'm assuming Karen's gonna charge us the same amount for the new barge. She hasn't said anything different yet.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to see if they're about equal. Okay, did you,
Yes, sir. I appreciate this line of questioning and all that, but I think we've already figured out that it's gonna be $40,000 to $50,000 a year from now till hell freezes over the end of time. If you still want a barge, it's gonna continue to cost $40,000 or $50,000 a year. As Commissioner Harvey pointed out, there's not another stretch of road in this county that costs $40,000 to $50,000 a year in maintenance fees. Not anywhere, not close to it. I'll bet there's not one that's half anywhere. Maybe 10% on some of the higher ones that there is in the county. Which brings me back around to my whole point. I think if we're gonna spend $40,000 a year, pick a number, it doesn't really matter, $40,000 a year towards maintenance, I think that the island residents should participate in that up and above where it would cost someone on the mainland to live. People on the mainland do not get any benefit from spending their tax dollars towards the ferry on the island. And I realize y'all pay taxes too, but so do I, and so do every commissioner that's sitting up here. And we don't live on Drayton Island. So I'm not saying that we throw you to the wolves or do whatever. I'm just saying that I think it's the right thing to do here, especially with the fact that we're gonna spend $107,000. We've already spent 71. It looks to me like we may be gonna spend 107,000 plus 71, and it's gonna be a maintenance fee going forward from this point forward of around $40,000 to $50,000 a year, whatever it is. I don't think asking for an MSBU on the island is out of line whatsoever. In fact, I think if we try to keep the pay, I'm not asking you to pay for all of it, just a part of it, just participate some. And if it's not worth island life to there, then we shouldn't be having this discussion today. If it's not worth all that's going on here and all this barge and all this discussion and all this money and a $4 million grant that's coming down the pike in a couple of years, if it's not worth all that to participate a little bit, why are we having this discussion? So I think that's the next step. I think we need to get an MSBU. That's my opinion.
okay, Commissioner Harvey?
I need to ask one more question. We took care of the landing, we've taken care of the barge. We got one left out there. It's called a push boat.
Yes.
And that's one thing we haven't talked about at all.
No.
So we're gonna spend $107,000 on a new barge, maybe. Push boat, let's have that quick conversation. What are we talking there?
My understanding is Karen supplies the push boat. That's part of her fee that we pay her.
Okay.
She provides the push boat. In our conversation with her, her boat would be able to navigate this new barge. That was some of the discussions we had
The push
with
boat
her.
is not in play here.
No, not at this time, unless somebody wants to get another grant, but no, it's not. It's been in the contract that I provide the vessel.
Now, wait a minute, you back up and say, you said not unless we get another grant. Tell me.
If you
I
want
need
to get
know what
another
that means.
grant for a push boat, you'd have to.
No, I don't. But
Okay, good.
I want to know all the details going forward.
So when they were designing the barge, the new barge, I asked them if they would please put two skegs, two elongated skegs that ran the length of the barge, which would enable us to steer the longer, wider barge much easier than just a simple flat bottom barge. And they did that. They put it in the design.
Okay.
I have a 26-foot vessel. I have many vessels. And yes, we can push with one of the vessels, but it has always been my understanding with the contract that I provide the push boat. It is not on county
Okay.
to provide
All
that.
right.
That's my
I'm
cost.
good. So you're providing the push boat. We don't have to worry about that. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
But also, it needs to not be wasted here in this conversation that Captain Karen, I assume it's all right to call you that.
Yes, sir.
Captain Karen may decide this time around, for whatever reason, she doesn't want to do it at all, and what we're talking about today is purely moot.
That's it. You're
Purely
right.
moot. I mean, it could go to who knows what if we didn't have somebody like her to come in here and take care of this for us. At what point it could go anywhere. I understand that the last time this project was bid, she was the only one that even had any interest in doing it last time. So if that's the case, and she decides she has no interest in it, there's no telling where this will go. Unless Mr. Pickens has enough time to run down there and run that push boat back and forth across the river for all the constituents on the island.
You might. You might enjoy that.
As someone that runs your barge now here at Drayton, I know it's a lot of money, $107,000, I get that. The barge we have is a good barge, whether Fort Gates uses it or not, obviously that's down the road for you guys. But dealing with Clay Electric and the emergency services that come over without having that particular barge and the new landings to go with it that help us load heavier weights. Right now we have like a single pivot point. And it's very difficult for vehicles that are low in clearance or, different water heights. So Clay Electric has been unable to bring over their larger equipment now for the better part of 3 years. We've had 2 hurricanes and they have struggled. If we had better landings and that weren't so restricted by water height, we would be able to get this done much
I
easier.
truly understand what you're saying, I do, but how long has there been people living on that island? Since the 1800s?
Probably a really long
And
time.
this is probably, the barge you have now is probably the best barge they ever had until they got this barge right here.
It's actually a very good barge.
And so each time we go, we upgrade a little more, and I get all that. And so I still think that at some point in this game, the residents on the island ought to participate at least at some level in the ongoing operating expenses and maintenance of the barge itself. I'm not asking them to build their own landings. I'm not asking them to pitch in on the barge or do fundraisers or bake sales or any of that stuff. All I'm asking here is that they participate at some level in the yearly maintenance fees on the barge.
I can't speak to that.
I know you can. I'm sorry for even saying that, but I mean, that's the way I feel.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pickens?
I do have a question on the push boat. Isn't there some monies that could be used if she has to enhance something on the push boat? Did we approve something that could be, it was an extra $9,000, or could some of that monies, if she has to repower it or something like that, that could be used, or I guess she has to provide that, so that could.
Commissioner, I think that was in item 49, and that money was used towards the barge itself.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
The only money we had for push boat was 49, and we had to use all that money towards the actual barge itself.
Okay. All right.
However, going forward, in order to continue to do business on the island side, I mean, structurally, the top is pretty, the underneath structure got fixed with the augers, but the top is shot. It's done. So it's going to need new boards or it's going to need steel plates. My suggestion would be the steel plates because it'll spread out the weight a little easier. It's easier, it's cheaper. It makes a better fit until they come. And then that way it doesn't look like something was built, before they got there. Just lay the plates down.
We should have money to do that, if I'm understanding correctly. Number 47 still has money in it.
I think that would be helpful.
I think this gentleman here has been wanting to speak for a while too. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes,
All right,
sir.
as we're talking about the steel plates, Press, as you'll remember, when we were going
Yes,
through
sir.
the drought earlier in 2017, there were big concerns about the landings, what weight they could carry, how we're gonna get firefighting equipment over there, not if the island caught on fire, but when. Thank the Lord we started getting some rain. So anyway, it was brought up from some of the volunteer firefighters to have some plates made to put on that landing to increase the weight capacity. And Mike, do you want to address this? Because
Well,
our
we
press
were
is-
just
that
talking
could not
about
be
that.
done.
We did look into that. We had the structural engineer look at it, and he said basically, I'm gonna say the 3/4 inch plate, which was needed for it, the weight of the plates themselves would not really increase the capacity of the landing significantly because of the weight of the steel itself. Our suggestion would be to go in and as an emergency situation right now and probably use some of this money and just put new timbers in there to hold it till DOT comes in. Because you start talking about steel plates to cover that landing at 3/4 inch steel, you're adding thousands of pounds right there just in structure itself. And you're not going to significantly increase the capacity of the landing due to the structural weight that we're adding to it anyway.
Okay. All right, and just a comment, I do, I agree pretty much with Commissioner Turner's comments, and I do agree with Commissioner Harvey that this has been a great discussion. It's one that's been needed for a long time. It looks like definitely when we get the $2 million or $4 million to build the ferry landings, that's gonna be a significant investment in Putnam County and Drayton Island. If we decide to do the barge, so we can, upgrade the barge, and then we'll have the weight capacities to meet the landings, and we can put all that to bed where we won't have to worry about that again. And then the road. It looks like the road's gonna be taken back into maintenance and be maintained by the county, so I think some progress has been made. It is expensive to operate the ferry. There's no question about that. And I've had people put it to me who said, well, nobody goes on the island unless they live there. So they're the only ones that, that use it. And I said, well, wait a minute. We've got some roads in Putnam County that are maintained, and unless you live down there or know somebody, you don't go down there. So I didn't buy that. So we have provided a reasonable level of service for you, and I think we need to keep that in mind. But also moving forward is that I know y'all bear a cost with your taxes that you pay, and also you pay a fee to Karen to use it. So we need to take that into consideration. But I think we need to ask y'all to look and get together, maybe Judith, a group again, to look at this and maybe consider if there was an MSB for the services of the ferry, for the maintenance and the services of the ferry, that you may be for just a little bit more money than you're paying, that you might get enhanced services. So instead, I believe it's 2 days a week, you might get 3 days a week, or you might get 4 days a week. I'm not sure, but I think you need to have that conversation.
Mr. Chairman, this young man right here has been standing there waiting to talk for
I
about
think-
15 minutes now, I think.
Okay. Your name and your address.
My name is Bert Bowden, and I'm at 136 Drayton Island Ferry Road. I want to thank y'all for coming out. I know that this is a tough thing. Like we talked about, we are paying $15 a trip to come over as we come over on the island. That's a two-way thing. When most of us have to use our cars to get food over and stuff. We stay for a length of time, so we do pay a portion of that for that, and that's gone up. But I wanted to talk about, you mentioned something about the cost associated with the road or the ferry, $50,000. Keep in mind as we look at that, what are most people doing? What does it cost to maintain a road on the mainland? From the cost of, like you said, grading or whatever you have to do, the maintenance for the road. A trash service. I don't know if y'all give more than 1 day a week of trash service to your residents too. So those are savings that you're getting from that we're not taking advantage of on the island too. You're not having to maintain the road. It's every now and then you come in and grade it like you said. So there's savings involved in that. So if you look at the 50 grand, you got to look at what we're saving you on the cost of that kind of stuff too. So I wanted to make sure that that's part of it too. The other piece of it, the important thing about the ferry is when someone had a major ailment over there for an ambulance or something to come across, that's important. We're residents on the island too, and if someone gets hurt and a rescue vehicle have to come across, it has to maintain that weight limit as a county road to give us service to, hospitals like that. By the time we put them in a boat and run them across and have someone meet us there, there's an issue to that too. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we're thinking about the overall cost of what we're doing now. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Harvey.
I'm going to respond just a moment. The sidebar conversation I was having was basically, have we ever determined out of somebody's ad valorem taxes what they really pay towards roads, courthouse, fire? Because I agree with Commissioner Pickens. You're kind of limited to what you're receiving out there. You don't really get police protection. You don't really get fire protection. We've already determined the fire truck can't be started unless some people are certified. So different from the mainland, that there is a police officer that drives by every now and then.
Right.
You don't get that. And there's a fire truck that goes by. You don't get that. Ambulance. You might get it, but you probably have to take the person over to the mainland side. So I think, at the end of the day, how do we justify that? It's going to come down to a weighs and balance here.
Sure.
And we got to find a number. And it can't be the entire number because we've already admitted there's certain things you're not getting.
Right.
But what is that number?
Yeah.
And I don't know that number. And I think that's for them to come to us one day and say, here's what we think. And y'all to go back and talk about it through your neighborhood.
So it sounds like the onus is on both of our parts. So I mean, for y'all to think about what the costs are actually associated, because as I bought land on the island, we had 5 or 6 day a week ferry service, so it was easy to get across and back.
Let me ask you this: you have to pay $15 to go across and $15.
No, it's $15 for a two-way. Once you're over
Two-way, $7.50 one each way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Unless you have a trailer, and then it's extra money to run a trailer across. If you're running a trailer.
Okay.
Yeah, or any bigger vehicle. If you have something else you want to bring across, it's more money. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Judith?
Go ahead and let Chris answer.
If I may, before Judith speaks, if we're grading roads on the mainland, not just grading, not adding material or anything, we're running about $200 a mile for road grading. This is fairly consistent to what the MSBU's are charging. Depending upon the size of the MSBU, they're anywhere from $100 to $190, $210 a mile. But we're right in that average. We're about $200 a mile to grade a road. And I just wanted to let you know that's where we're running. So if you start comparing that to what we would spend, their road mileage, it's 1.8 miles to the gate, and it's 0.8 miles of the paved road. So there's 2.6 miles of road on Drayton Island.
Well, I think it all boils down to what Mr. Pickens, Commissioner Pickens said a minute ago. I think that if the residents of the island want a higher level of service than what they have now, instead of a dwindling level of service from what they have now, they're gonna have to participate. So that means that if they want the road graded more than once or twice a year, which is what's going on forever in the past since 1992, every now and then they did it 3 and added something or whatever, but for the most it was 1 or none, sometimes 2 times a year they put a grader on the island. And so if they are willing to continue at that level of service and they still want their barge to run 1 or 2 days a week and what have you, so be it. If they want a higher level of service than that, then you're gonna have to participate in it, and that's just my opinion.
Ms. Judith?
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for being so patient on here. I know a lot of you have inherited this problem. The ferry, we know, has been in operation since 1940s. We know now that the road has been created in the 50s and it's now being accepted. During all this time, you've had a lot of different administrations. Every 10 years, they come up about the MSUB. There's a lot of documentation on that, guys, too. So let me just tell you, we do have that. Chip was where he was part of the past administration when we brought forward the grant. The idea was we don't have any money to do maintenance on the ferry. Now keep in mind, now that we have officially accepted this as a county road, and it is a Class 1, all these years it should have been part of that 6-week maintenance program, including the paved road by contract, by resolutions. That was supposed to be done every 6 weeks. It has not occurred, therefore you've not incurred costs which you, by contract, had said you were going to do. Most of us islanders have been fine with that. We're fine if we get it graded once a year, because if you do truly have someone come over that can grade it properly with a qualified road builder, it will last. And some of the problem is the ditches, which have not been taken care of. We have horrible drainage problems. Again, that has not been done for years and years and years. You all have not incurred the cost. We have. We've done it with flooding. We've incurred property damage to not only to structures, but to cars. Again, that was your negligence, because that's what the county was supposed to do and they didn't. Now, as Commissioner Harvey has stated about the MSBU, and they had their roads paved, and then the 1-cent tax came up. You know, when we last talked about the MSBU back in 1997, this is when we lost Eddie Babbitt as being our operator. Operating without a license, got called on it. T.C. Miller stepped forward because we went out to bid, you had no bidders. T.C. Miller was part of your board, not commissioners, but he sat on the zoning board way before you all's time. He charged $400 a day. Now, we were used to 6 days a week with Eddie. He was charging $16,000 a year, and I'm just giving you a little history, and some of you have heard this. $16,000 a year. He had his crew, being Byron and sometimes Billy. He didn't even pay them minimum wage. Okay, this is some good old boy stuff that some of you are aware of. Okay, now all of a sudden you fast forward, come into the now century, you bring in T.C. Miller because you have to operate some kind of service. It went from 6 days down to 2 days. We operated that way for over a year. You paid now $35,000. From $16,000, you paid $35,000 to T.C. Miller. Okay? And maybe not these four, maybe Chip remembers it. You authorized $35,000. Then it went out to bid. Don took it out to bid 3 times. Finally, T.C. Miller, knowing Karen, convinced her, please, please bid. When Karen put in her bid, she put in as a normal captain. Far exceeded what, if you ran 6 days a week, far exceeded what your $35,000 was. Then it was, well, let's scale it back. So they negotiated, scaled it back. Still over that. We even scaled it for $35,000, and the commission said, oh, absolutely not. Now, keep in mind, we've not been having road service, even though the landings were handling some of this. Don Jehovowitz went back to the drawing board. We all met here. Remember, it was very contentious. Got Karen to concede for 2 days. Let's get down to 2 days. Karen conceded all the way down to $25,000 with an increase of ferry fee. We pay the ferry fee. We don't get 6 days a week like we had, so the concession was, all right, we're only going to do 2 days. We're not going to do, if you want more service, then you can do, let's put forward the MSBU. So all of the islanders thought about that and said, okay, all right, let's see how we live with 2 days. And we now have lived quite well, not the most convenient, but we actually have learned to work with these 2 days. Now, the traffic has increased greatly, and we did give, in a sense, Karen a raise by raising it from $10 a round trip to $15 a round trip, and talk of maybe even going 20. But we have adjusted some of those fees, and she actually now gives Byron, who's the first crew, he actually does get paid like he should be. All right? Not way below minimum wage. Now the point is, if we have a county road and you're going to do service, whether it be 6 weeks or whatever, we need to do the roads. We need to do the ditches. That's part of the county road system. And again, that could still be 2 days a week. If you need special treatment or if we need something special, well then we contract with Karen and then the crew separately. That's what we do to have increased service or special service. But for all these years, and I've been here now 17 years, and I have all these older people that many of you met. You got more than half that island being between the ages of 60 to 80 to 90. And they rely on that ferry. They rely on going to their doctors now because it's too difficult to load them in the boat sometime. And we do those doctors' visits on a Monday and a Friday. And they're also on very limited income. So am I. I'm on a very limited income right now. So even if you talk about an MSBU, and I asked Mr. Turner, is you really want to go there, well then come up with some kind of proposal that might be fair. You know, what is the fair proposal? And what are we going to get for our money? Because we have not had road service or ditches, and we have incurred damages because the county has been negligent in maintaining what they're supposed to do in the long run. And now you're saying, well, you ought to be paying for that service. Again, it's part of the county road system. And that's why we brought the grant forward. And the grant being forward originally with myself, Lisa Grant, Don Jehovowitz, and Angelo, was to help offset these costs. And originally we were asking for a push boat just to help offset the cost for the ferry operator. And when Angelo and they put forth their engineering designs on the docking systems, we were looking at beefing up the wooden docking systems. You know, not thinking that something else would come around into this level, that you lose Angelo, you lose Don. Even when we were doing the grant application, they weren't even consulted, and then Rick Leary's office took it and didn't even consult with them and put in an application, and he's the one that put in he wanted a barge. Had that been presented that we want to buy a barge, because Rick wanted the old barge to go to Fort Gates for whatever reason, we could have put in $300,000 for that grant, for that barge, and we would have gotten it. We would have gotten it. We could have, if you really wanted it to be beefed up to a concrete, we could have put in $2 million for the landings, and we would have gotten it. But that wasn't part of the partnering system at that time, so that's old history. Now we're fast forwarding to where we are, and it is what it is. And unfortunately, if you don't move forward, then you're just walking backwards. And if we do move forward on the barge and beef up the landings as it is, I was there for the December 3rd meeting, along with Karen and Mike Nimitz. We had a very thorough discussion about doing the repairs on that barge, not the barge, I'm sorry, the landings. Yes, DOT was, oh, if you make it too big, if you make it too good, we're withdrawing. This went over and over until they finally got it through their head. It's got to last 5 years. So we do have a tonnage, but they do understand whatever we do, we need to make sure whatever repair we do has to last till they make it. Otherwise, Putnam County is going to endure more costs. So there's a little give and take on that. And as far as allowable costs on those 3 separate grants, one being the barge and the push boat, well, that has to be, those allowable costs have to be for those items. Under the landing and terminals, allowable costs aren't just repair, replacement, they're acquisitions of land, there's terminals, there's all kinds of things that you can do allowable costs for, just like Palaca has just done their marine land. Okay, big ad, in a big article in the paper. They built a marina or a terminal for less than $600,000. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? But if we move forward on this barge, which we need to do, which is also now going to, if we do that, if you build it, they will come, is going to increase some of the development on the island. Some of us will like it, some of us won't. But we have two islanders right now that would love, as soon as Brian's done with his one commitment, he wants 2 more houses. And I know the last house bid, he's probably got over 300,000 in it that he's putting back into this economy. And I'm sure, good Lord, by the time the tax assessor gets to him, his property's not going to be, his not taxable value isn't going to be 1,000. He's probably going to have a $400 or $5,000 tax bill. And if you allow the barge to go through so that more construction or more services can come through, the economy of these vendors increases because you want local people. You don't want to have to call somebody from Orlando or Jacksonville. This allows the growth to continue and the development, and we may not have the tax coming from the tax fund, but you do get additional funds from the ad valorem because it's going to increase these values. How do I know that they don't turn around and change our mill rate as you make the island better? That would be the next thing. Next thing, you instead of it being, you know, we're not a hog island, next thing, no, we're not the mainland, but next thing, maybe our mill rate might go up. We might not like it, but our mill rate may go up. That does put more money into your pocket in the county. Plus economic advantages, because the more people who are there, myself, I know I spend $10,000 a year alone just for my little income to make me live on that island between groceries and gas. Mr. Sauter, I take care of him, he dumps another $12,000. We start atomizing all these residents, we've got at least $500,000 plus that we're contributing to the economic benefit of Putnam County. We're not taking all that up to Jacksonville or down to Orlando.
Mr.
It is
Chairman,
coming in.
If I may, Judith, I appreciate all this, I truly do, and I understand the frustration of some of it, I get all that too. But we need to bring this around or we're gonna be here at 10 o'clock tonight trying to finish this up. So,
One more thing and I'm done.
okay.
Is the fact is, I just need to give you, because that helped answer some of your questions that you couldn't understand how this happened. Well, this is how it happened. But allowable costs for repairs isn't just going to be putting in new timbers and the plate. That would be wonderful. But if you've got that amount of money left for the grant, well then let's use it for some benefit of the landings that wouldn't affect DOT. Let's put in electric motors for that, cranking up the ramps. That's already been looked at back in several years ago. Let's put in a call box so that instead of relying on self-service, which you can't hardly get, let's put in a call box on both sides. So if you need to ring one or the other, you can. And we have the money there. We've already spent the 20%, so that's grant money right there that doesn't cost Putnam County anything. The money's there. So not only fixing the landings, but add some benefits and attributes to it. And that could be transferred then to the new landings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Judith. All right. Did you have some things to put in here?
I wanted to clarify something, and this is a misconception that we have not for Drayton but countywide. Road maintenance gets paid for from gas tax. We do not use ad valorem taxes for road maintenance. We strictly live off of the gas tax monies. I just want to make that point.
Yes, sir.
The other point I want to make, and I'm going to be blunt about this, if we take this road into county maintenance system, it will be a public road open to the public.
Correct.
Anybody can go over there and go on the island.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that the residents of Drayton Island ought to be very happy about the way things have gone today, because coming in here today, it was my understanding until I got this meeting, that road didn't belong to the county, that it had been worked on as a possibly even a private road over the years, even though it may part of it be owned by the county or platted to the county, but the actual road wasn't even on the plat where it's supposed to be, where the actual road is. So now that we've determined that the county is gonna do some maintenance to this, I think that's a win for you guys, a big win. So the next thing, if we could bring this home, Mr. Chairman, would be what do we wanna do with the barge? Do we wanna continue with the barge, the one that we've got a contract with. I think we need to make that decision next.
Well, that is it. What is if we stop right now and we just beef up our landings and we continue like we are, what are we looking at cost-wise?
The only cost we've incurred is that the barge builder did spot a performance bond to us. We'd had to reimburse us for that cost. I'd say we'd be looking somewhere in the $10,000 out-of-pocket expense to cancel the contract.
Okay, and then we have to return all monies back to the state of Florida.
What we don't use in that 49 grant, yes, would go back to the state.
So out of the 10, Mr. Chairman, out of the 10 grand, it may or may not, could be more or less. He's just
Could be,
making a
yes,
guess, I'm telling you right now. But let's just say for the discussion, it is 10 grand. Then only 2 grand of that would be ours, 8 grand would be the state's, and the rest of it would go back, correct? Because the original grant was a matching 2080 grant. So basically, it would go back. It'd cost us $2,000, and we continue on. At the same point, we could also go and take the $560,000 that they were a little bit apprehensive about spending in the past, because they were scared they wouldn't get the $4 million grant possibly, and so they were trying not to overspend on the 47 grant and jeopardize the $4 million. So we still have $500,000 or $600,000 there. And is it true, Press, that you can spend that on something other than just fixing the landings, or is that just for the terminal and landings? I think somebody here, might have been Miss Judith, said that you could use that she thought you could use that for other things, such as buying a piece of that lot that the landing is on, that who knows who owns or whatever.
The grant did say that you could use it for some land acquisition associated with the terminals. It did not get into the specifics, like if we were going to put a call box or something like that in, or if it covered, try to electric.
I'm not real concerned about the call box, because it would be no better than blowing the horn, and if there's nobody standing on the other end to pick up the phone, the call box is not gonna mean anything.
Right.
That's like when you blinked your lights and blowed the horn back years ago before they had cell phones. So, I don't know that I'm wanting to go there or not, but as far as the acquisition, I understand that on the island side, we don't own that land. We, being the county, don't own that landing. Is that correct?
Well, then we're, with Mr. Manning's interpretation that we now have it under maintenance, then we do own that section of the road that
Okay.
goes to the terminal now. Now,
Okay.
if DOT, because of their terminal or landing design, needs to acquire some additional right-of-way to make that work, that is all included in their $4 million budget.
Okay, trying to bring this back home then, I think the decision, Mr. Chairman, if I may, needs to be made by this board. Do we proceed with the new barge and continue with the $4 million to build the 2 landings at Drayton Island? That needs to be the next decision, and then we'll move from there forward.
Well, I don't particularly like a vote during our workshop.
Well, I think we need to today, Mr. Chairman. I think this decision needs to be made, or if we don't make it, then it's almost saying there's not gonna be one, because there's so many months of building this thing, and so many months of getting it delivered, and so many months. I think this has got to be made today. What do you think?
Oh, I'm absolutely, I think we need to have a decision, we need to bring this on, but I also want to know what our plans are for the old barge.
Well, that's next.
Okay.
I mean, that was truly my
Right.
next discussion, but I think the first discussion needs to be, what we're gonna do
continue
about this barge.
Are we gonna
If
do
I
the
could
new
jump
barge
in.
at the landing or not?
If I could jump in, and I think the question about the existing barge is maybe relevant in your discussion of costs and cost savings and what's going to happen with it. As far as the contract goes, the board has approved the contract, we've entered into the contract. So if no decision were made today by the board, the contract would go forward. If the board did not want to move forward with the contract, then that would have to be an action, certainly of the board. But as it stands right now, it's just kind of been on hold, so there could be additional discussion. But the contract has been executed, it is a valid contract, and it, you know, if there's no other action by the board today, then that, you know, staff would go ahead and issue the notice to proceed and.
But there's but a notice to proceed hasn't been issued, and so if
Right, it
if
hasn't.
they need direction from the board to either proceed with the notice to proceed or not, which means the contract would basically be null and void. There's no sense in dragging these people around. We need to figure, and we don't have the time to make it work if we don't make the decision, so.
Commissioner Harvey?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Manning, and thank you, Commissioner Turner. When did you put this contract on hold?
Several weeks ago.
Okay. I'm glad it wasn't several months ago.
No,
because
no, it was just several weeks.
this board needs to make a decision.
What, if I may, Chairman?
Now, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Where are we gonna find the $107,000 that we need to bring this thing home if the board goes ahead with it? Now, that's the question
Well,
that's,
Commissioner, I think
monies-
that was discussed before, and it's already been
Monies have already
budgeted through
been
Ms. Popel. They found the
identified.
money, and it's
Already-
been added to it already.
Yes, sir.
you already found the money,
Yes, sir.
and that's gonna come out of
We
general?
could not sign the contract unless the monies were appropriated. Ms. Papel did do the line item transfers to cover that, so the money is in the budget to pay for the barge.
And we approved that line item transfer already?
Yes, sir, we
Yes,
did.
sir.
Thank you.
I have, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like some directive, I think I'm getting it now, to proceed with the barge. I'd like to get a directive from the board if they want us to proceed with, and to improve some timber landing or some timbers on the Drayton Island side landing to temporarily shore that up, make that a little bit better. We can do that with some timbers right now. I can do that under an emergency contract situation to get that money going. And I would like a clear understanding on Drayton Island Road. Are we bringing that into the system as a Class 1 road or a Class 2 road?
Okay, no, let's go to the road. Let's just go to the road and deal with the road. You were gonna see whether that's a Class 1, Class 2, Class, whatever that class is, based on the records, based on, you know, the other roads in Putnam County, then you'll give us a determination on that road. So at that time, as far as I feel about it, we'll address that road later. We know the road is part of our system. What class it is, I think you need to give us a determination.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
now, the new ferry, or the new landings, the new ferry, that is to be addressed whether we're gonna go ahead with it or not go ahead with it. And I think that needs to be handled right now.
I agree with
I'm not for that, but it does need to be handled, so therefore we'll go ahead and, I just need to know the proper way to announce that,
Well, if we're gonna move forward, I think it could be done by consensus, Mr. Chairman, because the contract's already been voted on, funded, the transfer's been voted on. He's just not issued a notice to proceed.
what we're basically gonna vote on is whether we're just not gonna proceed.
That's right. If we're
Okay,
gonna
so,
proceed, he needs to
at
know
this
today, and
point-
he can go ahead and do the notice, because the contract's already been voted on, ready to go. The only thing we should have to discuss today is if for some reason, we're not gonna carry on with that barge, then we need to do something where they can go ahead and cancel the contract.
All right, now, so that at this point, I'm looking to whether someone will entertain a motion not.
Oh, we don't need a motion.
It's a consensus.
Okay, so we don't need.
You don't need a motion. The motion came when you all approved the contract.
Well, that's my understanding.
So
it's our
if we're not here, unless somebody wants to make a motion and you all want to vote on a
Well, then in
motion
that case, we'll
to
just go down the
rescind the
board.
contract, then what I'm hearing is, let's keep moving forward.
Tony, Tony, if you will, go down the line. Yay, you want to go ahead? No, you don't want to
This
go
is with
ahead.
the barge, correct?
For the barge, the new barge. This is specifically the new barge. Yay, you do want to go for it. Nay, you don't want to go for it. Tony, if you would.
Well, I have to go first.
You want me to do it numerically?
Yeah, I'd rather you do it numerically.
Yes.
District 2,
Yes.
District 3,
Yes.
District 4,
Yes.
District 5.
District 5-5, yes.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, please, if I may. So basically, we're gonna issue the notice proceed and build the barge.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
I will issue
Okay.
that tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, if I may continue this discussion to the next step.
Yes, sir.
We've kinda got the roads working. We've got the new barge working, which should make us get in a couple of years, should have the concrete landings working. We're gonna go and we're gonna take the 500 from number 47, of project 47, and we're gonna take some of that money and we're gonna make these landings last until the new ones come up best we can, unforeseen a catastrophe or something.
That is correct.
Okay, the next step of this discussion is, are we gonna send that barge when the new ones gets here and gets set up? Are we gonna send that barge to Fort Gates? Cause that discussion hasn't been made by me. I've just been told that was the plan. So if that's been workshop voted on, if that has become
Okay, yeah.
ordinance sometime in
If
the
you-
past, or,
I think if you don't mind, I'll take that and just kind of put it on hold. The
Okay.
Fort Gates, we have some situations that we're not totally sure on that as far as our landings, correct?
Right.
Okay, so forget the barge. Let's just worry on Drayton Island at this point.
I thought we were done with that, sir.
We're gonna
Drayton
move with the
Island.
proceed, we're gonna do the repairs, we're going with the barge. So the Drayton Island discussion is done. Fort Gates will come up at a different time.
Yes, sir.
And I think at this point, I'm gonna call a short 2-minute recess and before we come back.
Okay, different time than what? Than today, Fort Gates?
right, Mr. Turner?
Okay.
With all the motion going on, let's keep things moving and let's move on. You still had some more things on Fort Gates?
Okay, so can we continue, Mr. Harvey, while you're doing whatever you're trying to get set up? Okay. Fort Gates, okay, in a nutshell, basically on Fort Gates, we have the SCOP grant that we can't spend on, that was for the roads.
Yes, sir.
And we can't spend any more of it because we can't go into the forest. And we've already paid from there up to the other way, even though, and we don't own the land on either side probably. And so I'm trying to be as nice about it as I can. So
Yes, sir.
probably we don't own the land on either side. And so the Project 48, which we have, $500,000-600,000 left in that one too. What could Project 48 be used for?
Project 48 was
That's the Fort Gates for
Fort
$1 million.
Gates Terminal and ferry vessel improvements.
Okay, but we don't own the land.
On the mainland side of Fort Gates.
Both sides are mainland.
On the mainland side.
Our side.
Our side, yes,
Okay.
okay. You're not speaking the language. Okay,
Yeah.
on our side, we have an easement from the federal government from 1925 for a triangular piece of land that the county can use, and the verbiage in that easement said if the ferry operation ceased, then that land would revert back to the federal government.
Okay.
It did not have a cessation period. It didn't say for 6 months, a year, or whatever, but that was the language in it. So actually where the little bait shop is and those little cottages and all that, that is on federal property. Okay? The rest of the road, portions of what we claim, some of it is a platted right-of-way, some of it encroaches into the Mount Royal, the air park, that subdivision. Some of it does encroach into the state property, and that's why we're getting the easement on that to clear that up.
All right, so that grant has also got to be finished by September, October, or we lose it too. Number 47.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, 8.
Right.
48.
All right, so on number 48, we, and that's to shore up the landings, and they're torn up now as well as the existing barge is sunk, correct?
He did get the barge refloated, but I'm understanding it still has some damage to it.
So it's still not operable?
It is not
Are
operable.
the landings operable?
No, landings are not operable.
Okay, so but we have $500,000, of which, well, we still got to pay 120 of it, give or take a few thousand.
The Fort
120 of
Gate-
it, we still got to pay.
Right, the Fort Gates ferry, the Fort Gates terminal, that's the one we had designed and put out the bid, and the bids came in. We bid it twice. The first bids were 1.5 million. We did some value engineering, tried to cut it down. We put it out to bid again. Second bid came in at 1.14 million. So we're still $500,000 over budget on the landing.
Okay, so basically what we need to do is take our engineering and what we paid for, and if we want to move forward on it, we've got to go back to DOT and ask let them have this money back and ask for another grant with our engineering.
We could do that, but there's no guarantee we would get it.
I understand that we're not gonna guarantee, but I'll tell you, I can make one guarantee sitting in this room today that I ain't voting to spend another $500,000 on Fort Gates Ferry, including, in addition to what we've already done. And that's the only guarantee that I can make, is I'm not voting for that today. So the way that we get out of that is we basically say we're done with Fort Gates until some point in the future, and that the barge, that the existing barge be either sold as excess equipment or sold to somebody that's gonna build bridges or something up and down the river, whatever. I mean, dock guy or whatever, we can sell it as an excess piece of equipment at one of our auctions, or put it up into one by itself, correct?
That would be a question that Stacy would have to answer, but my understanding when I got here, Mr. Leary told me that his plan was that when we got a new barge from Drayton Island, the old barge would go to Fort Gates. Other than that, I have
I
no,
understand that was Mr. Leary's plan, but he's not with us any longer.
not with us,
and
so it's
I
wide
don't know
open.
that that's my plan. I don't know what the other commissioners are thinking about, but I don't see where, you know, being in the ferry business is a little tough to swallow anyhow. But we need to do it, but we don't really necessarily need to be in the ferry business at Fort Gates, because that's more of a recreational type ferry versus a livelihood ferry like is at Drayton Island. So to me, it's two different animals altogether. We don't own anything on either side of it. Right now, we don't own the barge. If we send that barge down there, unless we either give or sell it to somebody else to run it, and that person wants to buy it, then we've just doubled our liability is basically what we've done in the whole operation to start with, where right now in the current operation, we don't have any.
Yes, sir, you're correct.
Okay, well,
You're right, yeah.
I wanted to discuss that here. I don't think that has to be dealt with today, because we're several months off, but now we have a thorough understanding of what's going on. And we don't have the money to fix the landing, and the little bit of money that we have won't do much of anything to it anyhow at Fort Gates. So, I mean, I don't know that anything's got to be done any further than that today, Mr. Chairman, unless Mr. Tompkins thinks there is. Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
First of all, let me say thank you for the lively discussion we had. I think we really was able to get a lot of things done today. There might be a little bright light on the horizon, so if we can, let's just, hang on a minute and we'll see how that comes, okay?
Okay, and I did have a question for Commissioner Lible. Isn't the Fort Gates ferry part of the trail system now?
Black Bear Highway?
Scenic Black Bear, which is
Right.
a federal program.
Okay, so that has
Don't
nothing to
get a black
do.
bear on that
with-
barge.
It's,
That has
brought 'em to
nothing
get
to
on,
do with
buddy.
some of the
Encouraged.
trails and everything that you're involved in then.
not at all.
Okay.
Although it
so-
would enhance them greatly, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay.
We're not.
What do
I'm
you
with
got there, Carl?
Commissioner Turner, that we don't need to discuss this any further.
Okay. Did you have anything else there, Mr.
I was
Pickens?
gonna continue the discussion a little bit. We can table it.
Okay,
But
well-
this is Fort Gates is probably the oldest operating ferry in the state, right? Do you
That's what we've
think,
been
just
told.
your quick opinion, tying this into, to that, the historical portion, and then into the Black Bear Scenic Highway, that we could go back to DOT and say, hey, look, we just don't have enough money, consider this, this, and this, and maybe come back with a grant that would take care of it. And this, if we just opt out of this altogether and we don't get another grant and this ferry doesn't ever run again, that doesn't affect the SCOP portion of the road.
No,
Fort
sir,
Gates Ferry
does
Road,
not
does it?
affect the SCOP grant at all.
Okay.
Okay, all
Do you
right.
think it's possible to, are there grants out? Did you have any idea?
Well, as you well know, DOT works on a 5-year work program. So even if we apply for a grant next year, because their cycle's already started this year for next year, because their fiscal year starts in July. So, July of 18 is their 19 money. So even if we did apply for a grant, we would probably looking at 2024, 2025 to actually get monies for it, to get into their work program. As I said, there's no guarantee to that. That's the direction that we'd have to get from you gentlemen, what you want us to do.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner?
Go ahead.
Are we done with that conversation on Fort Gates?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Last week, I got a call from Congressman Yoho last Wednesday. Shared it with our administrator. So I'm going to let the administrator brought Mr. Allen. I forgot your last name, sir.
Harrison.
He's take Greg's place over with Congressman. He's fixing to be leaving here in a few minutes. So, Mr. Suggs, if you can briefly kind of tell the board what Congressman Yoho has requested, and maybe press some of this, you might find some light here at the end of the tunnel.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the email from Congressman Yoho's office was requesting any information that we may have on any unfinished projects and projects that we're having difficulty bringing to fruition. He's asked us to compile a list of those projects and give him a background on those projects, where we're at and the cost of those projects. And I can tell you, I can email out this list as well. Some of the projects that's just kind of briefly been touched on are projects like 9 Mile Swamp, Georgetown Boat Ramp and Park, East Palatka Water and Federal Park, the East Palatka Sewer, roads such as Holloway, Ashley Lake, Susan Drive, things like our business park, our barge port, and trails. These are some of the ideas that we were just kicking around very briefly on some things that we may want to try to get some background information on and send to Congressman Yoho's office to try to help fulfill this request from Congressman Yoho's staff. So what I would like to do is I will send out an email later today and asking each of the commissioners to respond only back to me if there's any other projects that you may think of, and I'll press also want you to be included in that.
Yes, sir.
And we'll just go from there. I mean, this is a very short time window. Again, kind of like the presentation last night, Commissioner Turner. It was an email that we need to try to get together real quick and get some information back. I'm sure we can do some follow-up emails after that, but I'd like to go ahead and at least get some list generated on some of the things that we may be wanting to talk about.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I think that every list and everything that comes out of this county needs to include that broadband equipment. I think that we've been very quiet about this to this point because we've been trying to determine who owns it and we're not stir up anything. But every single program, including Cat and Yoho and Congressman Yoho's 5-pillar plan, includes broadband. Everything you see includes rural broadband from a small county coalition up the ladder to the highest there is. So we need to make sure, because we have the equipment. We just need to figure out who owns the equipment, because we think some branch of the federal government does, and we've been working on this since October and haven't been able to figure out who owns this equipment. But we think it's somebody within the federal government. It's taken that long to find that out. And if that's the case, then what would it take to revamp that? Because everything that I see in every conversation from every congressman, state senator, no matter who it is, rural broadband is number one on the list of things that you want to get. We're 10 steps, not one step, 10 steps ahead of this game if we can just get it worked out. So I think that needs to be included in every list that we do everywhere.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing that.
All right, so we closed on the National Forest roads.
I'm sorry, I was,
Oh, okay. Any comments on the National Forest roads?
not really. I mean, we have, turned the maintenance back over to the Forest Service as the stipulations of our contract. I have not heard anything back from the forest ranger or on that. I understand that they are grading the roads at least once every 2 months or so, and they seem to be doing a fairly decent job of it.
Yes.
That's the only report that I've gotten. I did get a communications from the Postal Service several weeks ago confirming that the county was not doing maintenance, and my understanding is that the Postal Service has stopped delivery in the Forest Service almost completely, and they set up a mail kiosk at Salt Springs. That's the only report that I've heard, the only interaction I've had concerning the forest roads in the last several months.
Mr. Chair, I might be able to add a little to the discussion here. If you remember, I sent an email out to all the county commissioners a couple weeks or so ago, following a conversation I had was with Ms. Kat Kamick of the Congressman's office. The discussion was for the county to, if we were willing to take in any of the roads within the forest, if we would let them know what those roads might be, they would try to get funding for us, was I believe it's what the email said that I sent out to each of the commissioners. And so that was the reason why the Forest Roads was put on this agenda was to have any conversation that we may need to have today with all 5 elected officials and with our Public Works Director right now. But it's just my understanding, Press Police correct me, so we've been asked to leave the forest at this point because they're not our roads, they're federal roads.
Right.
And maintenance of those roads would be left up to the federal government to provide.
That is correct.
I think some of the conversation, and I believe Commissioner Lowry, well, you brought it up at the last meeting, was due to a comment that was made. And so a follow-up with that conversation was, okay, would the county be willing, and if they were, which of the roads in the forest would they be willing to take into their scheduled maintenance if we could get some type of federal funding to pay for the maintenance? And that is the last and only conversation that I've had.
And agreement.
Yes, that's the last and only conversation that we've had.
If I'm not, we let Orange Springs take care of the maintenance in there because of the cost of running our equipment down there. Am I correct?
What we did was we piggybacked on the Forest Service contract. They use Orange Springs to grade all the forest roads. It was more economical for the county to piggyback on that contract, and we paid Orange Springs almost $60,000 a year to maintain, I think it was 11 roads out there, but those roads were owned by the federal government. And I'm gonna ask Mr. Manning to chime in that one of the things that we were kind of dinged on was that we were spending taxpayer dollars on roads that the county did not own.
Well, in this case, if Ted Yoho can get funding, wouldn't it be advantageous just to have the forestry pay Orange Springs to take care of these roads, or do we want to step in the middle of that?
Well, I can't disagree with you. If it were to be something that the county was interested in taking back over, correct, we would need an agreement with the Forest Service and the funding source from them to pay for it, because Mr. Tompkins is correct. The auditors pointed out that we were spending Putnam County taxpayer money on roads that we did not own. They weren't county roads, and we're not allowed to do that. So we can, by an interlocal type agreement, we can, and funding, we could certainly do that, but, yes.
Well, I was just saying.
If they have the money and they have the contract, it seems to make sense. Why don't they just go ahead and do it?
Why don't they just have them do it? Why do we need to be the middleman that says, because we're not gonna do it anyway ourselves. We're just gonna hand the money off.
Right.
And say, handle this.
Chairman Goddard, the meeting we had with Kat and the forest people was that she was going to try to get additional monies appropriated to the Forest Service to increase their budget to be able to take better care of the roads. It was not.
Right.
Because when we had the meeting with the Forest Service and the group, we went to Ocala and met with them, that the federal government does not do interlocal type agreements. They don't have a vehicle to do that, because that was discussed.
Okay. Okay. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, the problem with all this is that they've made about 5 comments over the last 6 months. They're gonna pour money out till 2020, and then they're gonna wean us off.
Yeah.
So if we start in this project, even if we get it all lined up and do an interlocal agreement and everything else, in about 2 or 3 years, they're gonna say, okay, well, y'all just go keep doing it by yourself for a while. Yeah. So I think we need to stay as far out of that as we possibly can. That's just my opinion.
All right, any other comment on the National Forest?
Wave and support.
Just the fact that they have Putnam County property and pay taxes to this county, it binds us a little more than we're making believe here. I don't have the answer, but
Yeah, I
it's
think-
not that easy.
Yeah, I think so too, but I don't have the answer for it. But the answer was that Congressman Yoho was gonna find some extra money.
Department of Interior.
Yeah, and then they would be able to grade them, so.
But they're not our roads. It'd be no different than working on a private road. It'd be a federal road, and, the auditor said.
But
Yes, sir.
I don't argue that one bit, but to the point that they can't get in and out is atrocious. We can't turn our backs on that. And it's gotten to that point and continues to do that sometimes. They've been a little better lately, but still, when they have an emergency, it needs to be addressed by the Forest Service or somebody. they have property, they're taxpayers. They have a right, you know, to be able, even if it's a private road, if you treat it that way, and the ambulance can't get there, there's an expectation that they should be able to get out. You know, I believe that. And I think that we gotta continue finding a solution. I don't know what it is, gentlemen, but, you know, we can't turn our backs on those constituents. I don't believe it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, let's move on to our loans for dirt to pave projects.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Chris, how far are you from having an idea of how many roads you've got and just an absolute shotgun estimate on what you think it's gonna cost? Because I think for us to do this, and I'm gonna try to get through this as quick as I can, Mr. Chairman. I think for us to try and come up with how much money that we're gonna borrow, I mean, obviously we could spend 40 million if we had it, on all the roads and what have you. So in order to determine how much that we can borrow, I think that we've got to first determine how much we can afford to pay. Number one, from Better Place Plan on the payments, and also from the road tax, if we use part of that, the gas tax, if we use part of that money for recovering or resurfacing of the roads, because that's what that's used for. So if we can determine the payment amount, and over the life of the current Better Place Plan, because it's my understanding if we go outside of that, we've got to start banking money to cover the payments past the end of the funding source that we use. So we need to determine how much we can afford to pay, for how many years that we've got till the current Better Place Plan is over with, and we can determine then how much money we can borrow. And then at that point, we need to start determining which roads we're considering doing, because what'll it take, a year to put this together? The loan, the bond, or what the bond issue, or whatever we're gonna do here? What did they do last time? Did they do bonds or loans?
It was a bond.
We started at the
before
bank,
my
though.
time, but I'm sure it's going to take you.
Short term with, I can't remember the name of the bank, but Tim found us a loan that got it started until the bonding process took place.
Okay. So I think the first thing we've got, unless nobody's for this, I'm just assuming that everybody's for it. I mean, so if that's the case, then I think we need to determine how much we can borrow and what it would cost us to borrow it for that period of time, because it's got to end at the end of the current funding source, I understood from the audit. And so, I think that's about where we are right now. If by consensus this board wants to look into it further, then we need to, number one, have the budget officer, if she ever shows back up to work again, have her determine how much, in her opinion, that we could fit in there, or maybe the administrator could work on what he thought his part was. If you could work on your part.
Yes, sir.
To see how much of that you think you could give up and still be able to maintain your things that you do as you go along, then we'd be able to know how much, if we're only gonna borrow $2 or $3 million or $4 or $5 million, I don't even think that's worth it. But if we could get 12, 15, $20 million, then we could do a lot of paving at asphalt at $87 a ton.
I'd like to take that savings from the asphalt and compare it to the interest amortization when we get to the numbers at that point.
Very good point, Commissioner. Very good point.
Well,
And like to see what-
as I said, we get $2 million a year from Better Place funds for dirt to pave. I get approximately $1 million a year at a gas tax. So if we could do a significant portion, 1.6, 1.7 million out of the Better Place funds to pay the debt service on whatever amount we could borrow that would give us, I would still have the $1 million a year to put towards resurfacing to try to keep our existing paved roads in a decent shape. But if I could get $15, $20 million, we could pave some in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 or 70 roads.
Okay.
Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. But we might could leverage that money with the new Trump administration infrastructure package that's coming out. We might very well could show them, and you're trying to work on a master
roadway plan and drainage plan.
That is correct.
So we could show the federal government and the state government, could very well leverage that money to do very well, not just talking about asphalt savings, but talking about maybe paying a third and somebody else paying a third and somebody else paying, or even 50 cents on the dollar. We could possibly really stretch this money but I need to see a plan. I need to see.
Yeah,
I need
he
to
hadn't
see a
done
big
that, and he's talking federal projects. I don't think, it'll be nice if it comes all the way down to the county, but I don't, unless,
Commissioner, according to Congressman Yoho, that they're looking for ways to help us out right now. Now, it may never come to fruition, but it's absolutely worth going and asking the question. You don't get any cookies from the cookie jar unless you ask, can you take the top off?
well, I agree with you. If
You
that
sneak out
happens.
there and do it.
But you just said it right though, Commissioner Harvey. I want to see the plan.
I want to see a plan.
Yeah.
We can do a plan, but Commissioner Lible, you and I both know that majority monies that come from the federal government get delegated to the DOT, and it goes through the Planning Commission, the TPO, which we are not a voting member of.
That's exactly
and we
right.
get nothing.
But that might put us in a special niche
That's right.
if it comes
Okay,
out, so.
you and I both have had this.
We have, and it frustrates me to no end. The TPO won't take us in because we're not contiguous to the other northeast Florida counties, and it's not fair, and we're kind of on our own because the TPO in central Florida and south of here in Daytona don't take us either. We're kind of an island, speaking of islands today.
That might not be a bad thing, and you're
Yeah,
correct.
you're right, we could be a
Might
niche
have a
for us.
little more leverage.
We could prove our point through congressmen. We could possibly get a special deal.
And I've said from day one since I've been here, I talked to Secretary Evans in length about if you could give us a 5-year funding on scrap and scop and the other one, I can't remember the other one that they have. If you could say, well, your Putnam County is going to get, $1 million a year for that's $5 million. We add our $5 million, now we got $10 million. Let us do the roads we want to do. They don't care which roads we're doing. It's pretty obvious of that. So, we could easily stretch that money out.
Well, just to let you know, DOT this year cut us back to one project submittal.
I know.
Scrap, stop, whatever we going after,
do
it's
that.
one submittal this year.
But since I've got the floor, let me say this. I think it's very important, and I've said this for a long time now, and it looks like we're finally starting we gotta bring these commitments in. We made promises, we threw a number on the wall, only to realize that none of those numbers were correct, and we can't do the projects we got there. So let's just fess up and go, yeah, we can, no, we can't. Here's what we need help on. Sorry, our eyes were bigger than our wallet. We were expecting better, but we didn't get it. Whatever the reason. And then let's just be honest and say, okay, from here, clean slate. You already said DOT is not going to allow us to throw that number on the wall anymore.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, so basically, if I'm understanding correctly, y'all are gonna move forward with a list and see if you can participate in the funding, and I know that you want your whole $1 million you're getting now, but I ain't gonna be for that. If we're gonna spend a third of this money on resurfacing roads that we're gonna get, then I think that the gas tax should pay a little bit of the payment going forward.
That is a decision for you to make, but I'm just giving you the
Don't
dollar
blame me.
amounts
If
that
I
I
was
get
sitting
every
in
year.
your seat, I'd want $1 million too. I get it.
All right, so,
Okay,
All
so
right,
we
let's
can
wrap.
move forward with that, you think, about putting this plan together?
Yes.
I think that the next time we have this discussion at whatever workshop we have it, if, the board members agree, I think that Mr. Smith ought to be here, and where he can start talking about what we did last time as far as how he put it together, where the bonds came from, that sort of thing, and what we need to do to get it started if we decide to move forward.
okay, well,
Just my opinion.
Mr. Administrator.
No, sir, I think enough's been covered here today. I only have one request, is there's the event this Saturday night supporting the chamber, which the county has a table there. So if I can just, in the next couple of days, if you guys can just send me a quick email or whatever, if you can or cannot be in attendance on February 17th out at the fairgrounds that evening,
I'd be taking my wife off for anniversary weekend.
Okay, so
I'll let
Commissioner
you know.
Harvey is out.
My company actually bought its own table, so while I
Commissioner-
appreciate it, I,
Okay,
have another seat already.
okay,
As far as I know, I'll be there and my wife
Okay.
will be there.
all right,
Holly and I'll be there.
okay.
Liz and I will be there.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
That's table 8, 2, 4, 6.
That's it, perfect.
Mr. Chairman, before we end, I really want to commend this board and you today. I know we had some major discussions, but they needed to happen. And I really, Commissioner Turner, thank you. Commissioner Pickens, Commissioner Lible, thank you very much. And Press and James and Mike, I mean, we've been needing this conversation. And if you'll get us a copy of that paper that you have, I appreciate it. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Any discussion?
Yes, one quick thing before we quit, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I'm sorry.
It doesn't pertain to the Port Authority.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're gonna close this and then
Okay,
move to the
excuse
Port
me.
Authority.
So if there are any other discussion,
What are we gonna, oh,
okay,
all right, let's go.
then this meeting's closed and we'll reconvene on the, we'll reopen the Port Authority workshop.
Yes, I just wanted to give you a real quick update on where we're kind of going with this. We've ran down the balance sheet, we've ran down the list of assets as far as we know what we think they are. We haven't been able to run out some minor things, and I've still got to meet with Tim Parker a little bit more on it, and what I'm trying to determine are things like, I've been told things by certain people that's been around in the past, and I don't want to mention any names because I feel like I'd be throwing them under the bus. But I've been told things like when the USDA came in and financed the jail that they made them do it in the Port Authority's name because the land was in the Port Authority's name, and USDA wouldn't float the loan without it. But it could have been during that time that all they made them do is just sign a paper and transfer the, or give them transfer of the land in case it ever defaulted. I mean, I don't know, but those are the kind of things that I'm having trouble running down. And because nobody but Mr. Lible was here during all that went on, and I can't talk to him about it except in one of these meetings. And so, but those are the kind of things. I mean, we've got basically a $2.3 million or $2.4 million net worth, and about $1 million cash in the port, and I'm talking generalities here for this particular conversation, and I can get down to the penny if y'all want me to. I have it here, but there's just so many questions that haven't been answered yet, and it's by people that know what they're talking about that have mentioned this to me. It's not someone off the street, it's somebody that was involved in this building. And so I just need some more time to keep running it down. I'm still working on it. I think before we can decide where we're gonna go, we've got to get to a starting point. We're not there yet, because we don't know what's going on. We know pretty much what we own. I'm not saying anything's out of line or wrong or anything else. I'm just saying.
You've got that documented, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. I mean, all this stuff already, I'm not saying anything's wrong, and we're gonna move forward. We just haven't got to that starting point yet where I feel comfortable that I have at least most of the information. I may never have it all, but at least most of the information, and we're not there yet.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Manning?
I can confirm for you that the land that the jail is on is titled in the Port Authority.
You want me to make a copy?
But now
I knew it
and I
was, and
don't
it's
believe the loan,
It's actually on the list of assets.
yeah, it is.
But I was told that when the USDA come in and made the loan for the jail, that they made them do something with the land because a lot of the assets on that property are on the deal, but the jail's not on the asset list.
Yeah, I
Well, I
think
don't
they
know.
eventually waived that.
Well,
I think they eventually waived that.
Well, we need to
But
try
I'll
to
double
find
check
out.
that part.
That means the jail belongs to the Port Authority and is not on the asset list. I mean,
Thank you.
I would assume that unless they gave them some kind of something that waived it,
We made multiple trips to Ocala,
was that what it
things
is?
like this.
Well, I didn't want to share.
Not about you.
Sorry, you made trips to Ocala.
The rural development straightening out
Good point.
things like this also. And, but I can't remember the details, it's impossible, years ago.
Brief down there.
No, I think it needs to be right where you
All
are.
right. Any other
Well, the
discussion?
chairman get on you instead of me.
Seeing none, Port Authority meeting is closed.
Barge facility, the boat is gone, the renovation's been done, so our dock is now cleared. He moved out this week. Crowder Gulf is finishing up their hurricane debris from the river. They'll be gone by the end of the week, so we are completely empty now at the barge port.
Did you get that, Tony?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, that's part of the Port Authority business. So,
That's it.
we heard anything about the guy that wants the lease on the building?
Hadn't talked to press yet.
Okay.
We can talk more about that.
I think we're adjourned.
Well, in private, outside of the meeting, we heard